Rintarou Okabe, a mad scientist with a serious obsession with science, is on a mission to blow people's minds. Alongside his airheaded but sweet friend Mayuri Shiina and tech wizard roommate Itaru Hashida, he kicks off the Future Gadget Lab, claiming they're going to change the world. Things get wild when Okabe crashes a time travel conference and accidentally discovers that their microwave can send text messages into the past. Naturally, this messes with the timeline, and before he knows it, Okabe's got the shady CERN organization breathing down his neck. But before we begin the story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. In the buzzing electronics district of Tokyo, Rintarou Okabe, a guy with slicked back hair and a lab coat, is taking his childhood friend, Mayuri Shiina, to a press conference at Radio Hall. The event is all about the invention of the century, a time machine. Suddenly, Rintarou feels a tremor he thinks is an earthquake, but soon spots a strange object on the roof. Mayuri interrupts his thoughts, dragging him towards something more fun. They find themselves in front of vending machines, where Mayuri bemoans her lack of 100 yen coins. Ironically, Rintarou decides to waste his coin on a blind grab. To his surprise, he scores the rare metal Upa toy. Not interested in it, he hands it over to Mayuri, who happily names it. As the conference announcement blares, they part ways. Inside, Dr. Nakabachi kicks off the lecture while Mayuri wanders outside, later admitting she lost her precious metal Upa. Meanwhile, Rintarou grows alarmed by Nakabachi's theories, feeling they echo the infamous John Teeter. This rubs Nakabachi the wrong way. Before Rintarou can stir up more trouble, a sharp young woman pulls him aside. It's Kurisu Makise, a renowned scientist. She snatches his phone, only to find it's dead. Rintarou tries to play it cool but ends up sprinting away, nervous about their previous encounter. He soon receives a mysterious message, only to discover it's just static. Mayuri reappears, still fretting over her lost toy. Rintarou tells her to move on, but when she mentions its auction value, he softens. Mayuri reminds him they'd never sell it anyway. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream shatters the air, sending Mayuri into a panic about its source. Rintarou, sensing danger, tells her to leave the building. He peeks inside a room with the door ajar and is hit with a horrifying sight. Kurisu Makise, the woman he spoke to earlier, lies lifeless in a pool of her own blood. Shaken, Rintarou stumbles out and mutters to Mayuri, "Someone stabbed Kurisu Makise on the 8th floor of Radio Hall." The wail of ambulance sirens cuts through the lively chaos of Akihabara. Though rattled, he walks away, only to find himself in an even stranger situation after hitting send on his phone. Out of nowhere, he receives a chilling message. Unknown number, 0.57124. After sending word about Kurisu's death, Rintarou finds himself completely alone in Akihabara. He heads back to the conference building, where Kurisu was murdered, and runs into Mayuri, who seems blissfully unaware of the tragedy. His paranoia spikes until he's stunned by an artificial satellite that has crashed atop the building. Joined by Itaru Hashida, a savvy hacker, Rintarou jokingly names his lab members in front of a TV monitor showing a comical alpaca face. The two bicker, with Itaru glued to the web while Rintarou revels in his own genius. Soon, Itaru switches the channel to breaking news about the satellite crash, and Mayuri nudges Rintarou about how mad he was when the conference was canceled. Rintarou realizes he may have stumbled into the machinations of a mysterious organization. He finds their lab's TV broken, and with Itaru unhelpful, Rintarou begrudgingly hauls the old TV under the scorching sun to a repair shop run by Yugo Tenuji. After a painful negotiation over the repair cost, Rintarou leaves, sulking, but Mayuri's cheer lifts his spirits. Fed up with Mr. Braun's oppression, Rintarou orders Itaru to activate Future Gadget number 8, despite Itaru's disdain for Rintarou's antics. The experiment, turning bananas into green jelly, draws Mayuri's protests, but she ultimately gives in. After the bananas transform, Rintarou drags the reluctant Itaru outside for a seminar at the Akihabara Techno Forum. Accidentally, Rintarou discovers that the message he sent about Kurisu's death was dated 5 days in the past, on the 23rd. His heart races when he sees Kurisu standing outside the elevator, alive and well. He can't believe his eyes. Rintarou Okabe stumbles into a jaw-dropping scene at Dai Building. Kurisu Makise, the girl he thought was dead, stands before him, alive and kicking. Confused and desperate for answers, he tries to inspect her, but Kurisu slaps him with a harassment label. Before he can process the moment, Kurisu is called away, and Okabe, feeling dramatic, introduces himself as Huuin Kiyoma. Turns out, Kurisu is the one giving the lecture. As she begins, Okabe and his buddy Itaru Hashida sit in the back, still reeling from the shock of her existence. When Kurisu boldly states, "Time machines are foolishness," Okabe can't hold back. He argues that it's too soon to dismiss the possibility of time travel, but Kurisu counters with her brilliance, turning the lecture into a debate. Ultimately, she crushes his hopes, backed by her spot in a prestigious science journal. Later, Okabe is sulking when a text from Mayuri Shiina leads him to Yanabayashi Shrine, where he meets Luka Urushibara, a boy with a feminine vibe swinging a sword. Okabe, wanting to shake off the grim day, jokingly demands an exorcism from Luka, who panics and prepares for a ritual. After some banter, they leave with Luka's snacks. As sunset paints Akihabara, Okabe walks with Mayuri, who heads to work at a maid cafe, May Queen Nyan Squareward. He soon encounters Mr. Tanuji, who mentions a new part-timer, Suzuha Amane, who seems oddly interested in Okabe. That night, he digs into the mysteries of time travel and stumbles upon John Titor, a self-proclaimed time traveler, only to be hit with a twist. His friend Daru doesn't even know who Titor is. On July 29, 2010, Okabe spots a girl snapping his picture and, in a panic, chases her down. She reveals she's documenting something else entirely and tries to blackmail him into revealing info about an old computer unit. Later, at May Queen plus Nyan Squareward, Okabe chats with Daru about the IBM 5100, a legendary computer. Soon after, a message from the girl, Moika Kiryu, arrives, filled with emojis, making Okabe suspicious. Back at the lab, Okabe analyzes a gel banana, confirming it's been molecularly altered. He decides to experiment again with the phone wave, name subject to change, using a banana labeled with Mayuri's name. After an anxious moment, the microwave finishes, and to their shock, the banana has vanished, leading them to wonder if they've created a teleportation device. Just then, Kurisu appears, witnessing their latest breakthrough. Kurisu bursts into Rintarou's secret headquarters, triggering a heated confrontation. Itaru, however, seems to have teamed up with her to find Rintarou's lab, making Rintarou suspicious that his friend might have tipped off the agency. Kurisu, unfazed, reintroduces herself and offers a handshake, which Rintarou refuses, sensing her murderous intent. She takes a seat, eyeing the gel banana on the table. Initially, she came to check if Rintarou's claim about her death was true, but the banana catches her attention. As Suzuha flips channels on TV, Kurisu inspects the bizarre banana, noting its softness and uncharacteristic attachment to the bunch. Itaru, finding Kurisu's line about perverts' bananas amusing, taunts her. Unlike Mayuri, who is an easy target for Itaru's antics, Kurisu blushes, prompting Rintarou to join in, much to her embarrassment. Kurisu shifts focus back to the gel banana, suspecting the microwave behind them holds the key. Rintarou hurriedly covers it, and Itaru suggests they may need Kurisu's help with the microwave's development. Rintarou, still wary, offers her an ultimatum: join the lab and forget any past sexual harassment. Kurisu reluctantly agrees after an exchange of childish banter. Soon Mayuri arrives, elated to meet their new lab member. But the team is quickly drawn into work when Itaru reports a strange lightning event involving the microwave. Rintarou recalls the moment he sent a message about Kurisu's death, and Itaru remembers connecting his phone to the microwave. The three decide to recreate the incident to see if they can replicate the results. Mayuri unexpectedly opens the microwave, causing a bolt of electricity and an explosion, leaving the room in smoke. When the dust clears, Rintarou checks his phone and finds that Itaru's message was received, dated exactly 1 day earlier. The microwave has sent a message back in time. Rintarou is ecstatic, declaring the microwave a working time machine. The next day, Rintarou receives 13 messages from Shining Finger, who wants to meet. He invites Itaru, but he's busy with the phone microwave, which is no longer producing gel bananas. Meanwhile, Kurisu has vanished after Rintarou's time machine declaration. Itaru shows Rintarou a picture of CERN's Large Hadron Collider, LHC, which sparks Rintarou's interest in the possibility of time travel. CERN denies the creation of black holes, but Rintarou pushes Itaru to hack into their systems to uncover the truth. He leaves the bill for the food stand with Itaru. At the lab, Rintarou learns from Suzuha about the IBN 5100, a vital piece of tech that could help change the future. The two then dive deeper into John Titor's theories on world lines and the dystopian future that may be coming. Itaru, frustrated with his hacking attempts, is left alone by Rintarou and Mayuri, who share a quiet moment eating snacks. Later, Itaru triumphantly announces that he has hacked into CERN. He leads Rintarou into their systems, revealing email conversations about a Z program involving mini black holes. One final report shocks them both. Human is dead. Mismatch. Itaru drops a bombshell on Rintarou. Someone's been killed by an experiment from CERN. But after a fruitless hacking session, Itaru calls it quits for the day. As he digs into some Odin, Rintarou recalls Suzuha's info about the IBN 5100 and John Titor's final message. Deciding it's time to contact Titor, Rintarou dives in. Later, Rintarou and Mayuri are at the laundry, dealing with an overflowing load of clothes, thanks to Itaru's size. Suzuha shows up, says her hellos, and heads off to work. Rintarou then teases Mr. Tanuji, leading to one of their usual back-and-forths. Meanwhile, Mayuri does her Stardust Shake hand, a habit Rintarou remembers from childhood. Meanwhile, Kurisu is still stuck on the time machine experiment, struggling to make sense of it all. She's skeptical, but settles on electromagnetic wave disruption as a possible explanation, minus the gel banana part. Then, she remembers she needs to hit the laundry too. At the laundry, Rintarou receives messages from Shining Finger and a surprising reply from John Titor. He rushes back to tell Itaru, but neither Itaru nor Mayuri are up for helping him track down the IBN 5100. Rintarou then runs into Kurisu, who's avoiding him, but gets dragged into his crazy scheme anyway. After some back and forth, Kurisu admits she doesn't want to repeat her father's mistakes. Rintarou, shocked, reconsiders asking her to join the lab. Before she leaves, he asks if she knows anything about the IBN 5100. Kurisu listens, but dismisses him as crazy. Rintarou later heads to a donburi shop, where Mayuri messages him about Ferris knowing something about the IBN 5100. Rintarou storms out and heads to May Queen Nyanyan, where Ferris is hosting a card game contest. Rintarou gets roped into the game and, despite his plans, is soundly defeated. But it's worth it. Ferris reveals she's seen a similar computer at an Akihabara shrine. Meanwhile, Kurisu's done her homework and confirms the IBN 5100 can analyze special programming languages. Rintarou tracks down Luca about the shrine computer, and soon, he and Kurisu are on their way there. After a bit of back and forth, Luca leads them to the shrine's storage room, where they find the old computer. Donated 10 years ago with a message about a man who would need it. They start bickering over who'll carry the 24 kilograms beast back, but Luca's dad is relieved to see them getting along. The trip ends with Rintarou and Kurisu arguing again, each carrying half the weight. The day winds down as Suzuha locks up the electronics shop, joined by Rintarou and Kurisu, who's lugging a heavy box. Suzuha guesses it's the IBN 5100, surprising the mad scientist. When Suzuha spots Kurisu, her gaze shifts like a predator locking onto prey, but Mr. Tanuji interrupts, snapping her out of it. Kurisu is mildly rattled by the tension. Later at the lab, Mayuri greets Kurisu warmly, and Rintarou teases her over whether to stay or leave. As Itaru digs into the IBN 5100, he hits a snag. Connecting it to a modern computer is impossible. But with the right parts, Itaru sends Rintarou on an errand, only for him to pass the job to Kurisu, causing another argument. Meanwhile, Mayuri gives Kurisu a tour of the apartment, while Rintarou ends up shopping for parts with Suzuha, who unexpectedly helps him pick them out. At a vending machine, Suzuha reveals she's been in contact with an expert on IBNs, but the expert died years ago. She apologizes for her earlier behavior with Kurisu, but Rintarou brushes it off, understanding her frustrations. A passing helicopter catches their attention, and Suzuha, thinking it's a bombing, relaxes when it turns out to be a media chopper. She invites Rintarou to the fireworks display, exchanging emails before leaving. Back at the lab, Kurisu tries on Rintarou's lab coat, which excites him since no one else has ever worn one. They share a bowl of ramen, and Kurisu beats him at a trading card game, teasing him about his poor strategy. When she calls him Okabe, he freaks out, scaring her into tears. He apologizes, but she insists she's fine. August 1st, 2010. Itaru finally links the IBM 5100 to his computer, and they discover shocking data. CERN's secret project involved creating a utopia with time travel. The experiment stages included human trials, which horrifies Kurisu, but Rintarou's already aware. He presses Itaru to hack into the emails about the project. Despite his fears, Itaru dives in, revealing reports of failed human trials that transported victims back in time, turning their bodies into jelly-like substances. Kurisu explains the science behind it, using Kerr black holes to compress human bodies and send them into the past. Despite the grim revelations, Rintarou sees it as a challenge, determined to surpass CERN with his own time-traveling machine. 5 days after the satellite crash in Akihabara, the site has turned into a tourist hotspot. Among the crowd is Moeka Kiryu, glued to her phone. After getting a message from FB, she quickly replies, dodging a reporter's interview request. Meanwhile, Suzuha on lunch break joins Okabe and Daru at a beef bowl restaurant. Suzuha is excited to try the dish for the first time, while Daru grumbles about Okabe leaving him to pay last time. Okabe brushes him off, sparking the staff's ire. The tension is broken when Mayuri arrives. The group heads to the CRT shop, where they meet Kurisu. Suzuha glares at her again, but Mr. Braun calls Suzuha back to work. The others head to the lab, where Okabe calls a roundtable meeting. He announces the need to perfect the phone microwave, suggesting they name the phenomenon of sending messages to the past. After some banter, Mayuri's DeLorean mail is chosen, shortened to D-mail. Experiments begin, with the team sending a D-mail and testing the microwave. The first message is successfully sent to the past, but broken into 2 parts. Later, at a convenience store, Daru mentions his own D-mail message was cut off. Okabe is reminded of the Jellyman reports. Outside the store, Okabe runs into Moeka, who attempts to text him. Daru, intrigued by her appearance, tries to introduce himself, but she ignores him, leaving him disappointed. Back at the lab, Okabe tries to calm Mr. Braun, but when that fails, he returns to the lab. Mayuri tells him Moeka has been texting him. Meanwhile, Kurisu explains the time mechanics behind the D-mails. Okabe suggests they rest, but a sense of unease lingers. Okabe later dreams he is falling into a black hole, hearing Kurisu's voice explaining that time and space have shifted. He reaches for the black hole, but then finds himself in a jelly-like state. The next morning, Okabe is woken by his buzzing phone. Moka's texts say she's on her way up to the lab. He rushes to open the door just before she knocks. Surprised, Moka continues texting him even in person. She asks to see the IBM 5100, which Okabe reluctantly lets her examine but refuses to lend out. As Daru, Mayuri, and Kurisu arrive, they casually discuss the D-mails and time machine. Moeka, curious, texts Okabe asking about their conversation, signed FB. Deciding to trust her, Okabe makes Moeka Lab member number 005. At the cost of Mayuri's microwave, the phone microwave evolves into version 1.03, now capable of sending messages to any phone. Mayuri tests it, and the success excites Okaranen, though he's wary of Moeka snapping photos. However, Rintarou soon fears that his future device has caught his landlord's attention and rushes to check with Suzuha. Fortunately, Mr. Braun is out, much to his relief. Later, Kurisu and Mayuri return from a quick store run, but to Rintarou's dismay, there's no Dr. Pepper in their bags. Kurisu suggests vegetable juice instead, leading Rintarou to call a round-table meeting about the next phase of Operation Erd, changing the past. Despite Kurisu's warnings about time paradoxes, Rintarou pushes forward with his first plan to win the lottery. Mayuri is disappointed by Rintarou's selfish use of the phone microwave, but Daru is more practical, eyeing the potential computer parts he can buy with the winnings. Kurisu finds Rintarou's plan ridiculous, which irritates him, especially coming from someone who lives like a celebrity. Daru advises Rintarou to choose a specific lottery, and Rintarou shifts focus when he notices Moeka has disappeared and wandered off to the IBM 5100. She asks to borrow it via email, but Rintarou refuses, instructing Mayuri and Kurisu to watch over Moeka, which annoys Kurisu further. Daru takes Rintarou through a few lottery websites, and Rintarou settles on the Lotto 6 for his experiment. He hesitates when he sees the first prize is 200 million yen, choosing instead to aim for the third prize of 700,000 yen. Meanwhile, Moeka gets a quick tour of the future gadget lab from Mayuri, taking pictures along the way. The The tour ends with Moika being allowed to send a message back in time containing the winning numbers. The experiment begins, and Rintarou appears to enjoy himself, joking with Kurisu. However, as sparks fly from the phone microwave, Rintarou hesitates to press the send key, fearful of causing a time paradox. After a moment, he sends the message, and almost immediately, he feels something strange. Suddenly, Rintarou finds himself back at the moment when he first mentioned the plan to change the past. He discovers he has the winning lottery numbers, but Kurisu doesn't recall being called Celebtine, a nickname she should have heard minutes earlier. No one remembers the experiment either. To Rintarou's confusion, Luca walks in with a lottery ticket, apologizing for getting one number wrong from the set Okaran gave him a week ago. As Kurisu pieces it together, she realizes Rintarou must have used the phone microwave a week ago. Rintarou notices a bottle of Dr. Pepper on the table, a bottle that wasn't there before the experiment began. Rintarou, shaken by a familiar unease he last felt when Kurisu died, checks in with Suzuha about the time machine. She overheard everything through the lab's open window, but promises to keep quiet, even suggesting he reach out to John Titor for advice. Rintarou recalls Titor's warning about time paradoxes. Altering the past shifts the world line's divergence number, erasing and replacing memories. In this new world line, Luca buys the lottery ticket, but Rintarou's confused. How does he remember both timelines? Later, Rintarou contacts Titor while Kurisu lounges nearby, flipping through a magazine. Soon, his inbox is flooded with messages. Luca, apologizing for his mistake, Mocha asking for another tour of the lab, Daru, stuck outside May Queen Nyanyan without his wallet. Then, Mayuri calls from the playground, worried about him. For the first time that day, Rintarou smiles, but the calm is short-lived. Titor's reply arrives, confirming Rintarou's confusion. He shouldn't remember the past that was overwritten. Titor reveals that time travel via email was unknown in 2036 and believes Rintarou holds the key to breaking the 1% divergence barrier, a task Titor has been struggling with. With the weight of the world's fate on his shoulders, Titor calls Rintarou the Messiah. In the lab, Okabe is shocked when he gets a message from John Titor, telling him he's the chosen one to save the world. At first, he's stunned, but then he laughs it off, saying he's a mad scientist who craves chaos. Daru walks in, and Okabe announces they'll keep experimenting with the phone microwave, even if it means upsetting Mr. Braun. Kurisu protests, but Okabe teases her, reminding her she was on board earlier. When Daru asks about it, Kurisu realizes Okabe has already changed the past with a D-mail. Curious, Kurisu asks how Okabe remembers the past world lines. Okabe explains he might have a power called reading Steiner, which lets him retain his memories while jumping between timelines, according to John Titor. Meanwhile, Luca is seen at the shrine, still thinking about the lottery ticket Okabe suggested. Back at the lab, Okabe, Kurisu, and Daru try sending a D-mail 5 days into the past to change the outcome of Daru's match against Ferris. When they check with Mayuri, she confirms Daru lost, proving the experiment failed. Later at the park, Okabe suggests Kurisu send the next D-mail, but she refuses, saying she doesn't want to mess with the past. Okabe calls her a spectator who's too scared to take risks. Before they can continue, Mocha starts texting Okabe, begging to send a D-mail. After ignoring her at first, Mocha appears right in front of them, asking directly. The next day, Okabe waits outside the CRT shop. Mr. Braun and Nai show up, and Mr. Braun scolds him for being lazy. Mayuri arrives shortly after, handing out candy to both of them. Suzu arrives on her bike and asks Okabe if he spoke to John Titor. Okabe confirms, but is unsure whether to trust him, which surprises Suzuha. Kurisu arrives next, and Suzuha glares at her for the third time, leaving everyone confused. Moeka then shows up, snapping pictures of everyone. In the lab, the group is preparing for another experiment. Okabe asks Moeka to create a simple D-mail message that could easily reveal if the past was changed. Moeka sends a message telling her past self from 4 days ago not to buy her current phone. Just before they start the phone microwave, Luca shows up with a watermelon as an apology for messing up the lottery ticket Okabe suggested. He leaves quickly after giving it. The group continues with the experiment. The phone microwave powers up, and Mocha sends her D-mail. Okabe's reading Steiner activates, signaling a shift in the timeline. Okabe, realizing his reading Steiner ability has triggered again, stands in front of the phone microwave, watching Daru and Kurisu talk, but he can't hear them. He quickly notices that Mocha and the watermelon Luca brought earlier are missing. Mayuri confirms Luca never came by, and no one but Okabe remembers Moeka. Kurisu figures out that Okabe must have sent another D-mail. Panicking, Okabe checks his messages. Moeka's texts are still there. He texts her, and she replies, saying she's busy. Relieved, he begins to wonder about the true extent of his ability and whether he is truly the savior John Tidor claims him to be. Later, Okabe and Kurisu talk on the roof about the effects of the D-mail. Mayuri joins them, and the two leave together, leaving Okabe to contemplate his ability in solitude. That afternoon, Luca visits the lab, embarrassed by Mayuri's cosplay outfit. After some awkward moments, Luca asks the lab members if he can send a D-mail to the past. He wants to change his gender, inspired by overhearing their previous D-mail experiment. Kurisu is baffled, still thinking Luca is a girl, and Okabe, skeptical, agrees to help Luca. Okabe questions whether sending a text message can really change someone's gender, but Luca insists it's possible. After some thinking, Okabe sends Luca on a mission to confirm whether his mother had a pager while pregnant. Luca returns with the pager number, and the group sends the D-mail, triggering the reading Steiner. Back in front of the phone microwave, Okabe wonders if the D-mail worked. His suspicion grows when he stares at Luca, noticing something feels off. Kurisu calls him out on it, and although Luca seems the same, Okabe knows something has changed. He just isn't sure what. Rintarou and Daru discuss their D-mail discoveries at May Queen Nyan Nyan, but Daru points out they couldn't change his match with Faris. Rintarou, blaming Daru for the loss, insists a time machine's just a few tweaks away. However, Faris overhears and, with a piercing stare, asks about their project. While Rintarou is unfazed by her charms, Daru quickly spills the beans on the D-mail experiment. Back at the lab, Rintarou heads to the rooftop to dry laundry and finds Kurisu on a phone call, visibly upset. She denies crying, but Rintarou offers to listen whenever she needs. When she turns to him in surprise, he downplays his sentiment and jokes about using her for grunt work. Meanwhile, Faris visits Mayuri after her shift. Mayuri confesses her excitement about the time machine, but fears Rintarou's growing obsession. Later, Mayuri visits the lab with lunch, and Daru can't resist commenting on her school uniform. As Rintarou grows frustrated with the casual lunch, Kurisu dismisses his time travel ideas, pointing out that even CERN failed. But Rintarou remains stubborn, while Kurisu leaks her irritation to Daru. Daru reports a hitch with the IBN 5100, and Rintarou discovers it's missing. Kurisu links the disappearance to the butterfly effect, warning Rintarou of the consequences of changing the past. Rintarou contacts Luca, who traces the IBN 5100 to Yanabanashi Shrine, but it's gone. Faris confirms her father doesn't have it, though he owns many old PCs. Rintarou chases down Mocha Kiryu, who's also searching for the IBN 5100, but knows nothing. The group heads to Faris's apartment, where Rintarou learns she's actually Rumiho Akiha, the daughter of Akihabara's cultural mogul. She agrees to help if Rintarou allows her to send a D-mail, but he's cautious after learning about the butterfly effect. Reluctantly, he agrees, and Faris becomes lab member number 007. Faris prepares a mysterious message to send 10 years into the past. With Okabe's cue, she sends the D-mail, and Rintarou feels the familiar nausea as reality shifts. He soon finds himself in an unfamiliar house, meeting Faris's father. He asks about the IBN 5100, but Faris's father reveals he no longer has it, crushing Rintarou's hopes. As Rintarou leaves, he realizes something might have changed that he can't undo. Later, when Mayuri suggests visiting Nakano for doujinshi, Rintarou points out a nearby Toranoana. But the Akihabara they walk through feels wrong, a city no longer defined by otaku culture and mo. Rintarou is uneasy, wondering what else has changed. Okabe is stunned to find Akihabara stripped of its iconic mo culture. Mayuri and Daru deny the existence of places like Toranoana, and even May Queen Nyan Nyan has vanished. One simple text message has radically altered the world around him. Suzuha is at the radio building, gazing at the wreckage caused by a fallen satellite, while Okabe and Daru chat at the restaurant that replaced May Queen. Okabe learns that in this world line, they met Faris through a Rainet tournament. At the lab, Okabe reflects that although the past has changed, the bonds between his friends remain the same. Mayuri, flipping through a cosplay magazine with Luca, proposes a girls-only beach trip. Okabe remarks that Luca can't join since he's a guy, sparking a tearful reaction from Luca. Upon further inspection, Okabe discovers Luca is actually a girl, prompting Kurisu to smack him with a book. Later, Okabe, still nursing his pain, chats with Suzuha. She reveals she's in Tokyo searching for her father and shares a clue, a pin he used to wear. Okabe, in full mad scientist mode, recruits her as lab member number 08 and plans to send her dad a D-mail. Suzuha laughs, feeling better, and agrees to come to the lab the next day, regardless of her father's whereabouts. On August 9th, Okabe plans a party for Suzuha, whether she finds her father or not. While chatting, Okabe receives a creepy text that unnerves him. Later, Mayuri shares a memory of Okabe's near-death fever, which sparks a discussion about Okabe's mysterious reading Steiner ability. That night, while trying to prepare for the party, chaos ensues in the lab, with accidents involving gadgets. Amid the chaos, Kurisu opens up about feeling at home in the lab, and Okabe admits he created it for the friends he's found. When Suzuha doesn't show, Okabe goes searching for her in the rain, determined to stop her from leaving the city. He sends a D-mail to himself, telling him to follow Suzuha. On August 10th, Okabe realizes he's shifted world lines again. He meets Suzuha at the lab, learning that in this timeline she did come to the party, and even attended Daru's time travel meeting to search for her father. Suzuha tells him she had a great time at the party and will continue searching for her dad, but she's now officially a part of the lab. Okabe pulls off a daring experiment by having Suzuha distract Mr. Braun in a Mission Impossible-style move. Suzuha whips off her shirt and covers Mr. Braun's head, giving Okabe the opening to set the experiment in motion. But as the building shakes, the Braun family notices, and things go south when a screwdriver falls on Mr. Braun's remote, turning off the TV and halting the experiment. Okabe has a light bulb moment, realizing that Mr. Braun's TV was the key to sending D-mails. Mr. Braun punches him for his trouble. Back at the lab, Okabe reveals that the TV was the lifter they needed. Kurisu, skeptical about sending a person back in time, proposes a new idea: sending someone's memories via D-mail to their past self. Okabe, excited, pushes forward with her plan, though Kurisu warns it'll require a lot of parts, and even then, they may not be enough. On their way to buy parts, Okabe explains the concept to Mayuri, who's hesitant. They run into Moika, who gets spooked and bolts when the time leap idea is revealed. Later, Suzuha, punished for her distraction, walks around in a tank top, prompting Okabe to tease her about looking like a Street Fighter character. Nai apologizes for her dad's earlier punch, but Okabe takes it in stride. Before heading out to buy parts, Suzuha drops a bombshell. Kurisu works for CERN. After buying the parts, Okabe stumbles upon something unsettling. Kurisu's been posting on forums, much like John Tidor. Kurisu denies any ties to CERN, but Okabe isn't buying it. Later, in a heart-to-heart at the park, Kurisu opens up about her fractured relationship with her father, a physicist she once admired. Their exchange ended when she critiqued his work too harshly. Kurisu fears her father will disapprove of her time leap machine, but Okabe vows to help her fix their relationship. Meanwhile, Mayuri struggles with heavy bags, and at the lab, Okabe gets into a pudding dispute with Kurisu over a labeled snack. When Mayuri shows up with sleepover gear, the tension escalates. Okabe heads out for groceries but receives a chilling text, "You know too much," with an image of a decapitated doll. Panicked, he rushes back to the lab, only to find it dark and empty. In a frantic search, he walks in on Kurisu and Mayuri bathing, only to realize something is seriously wrong. Daru later discovers the lab's computer has been unknowingly connected to CERN's network, implying that they've been hacked. Okabe, horrified, fears CERN is behind the threatening message. Kurisu, using CERN's LHC, manages to shrink memories down to D-mail size, finally perfecting her time leap machine. It can send someone's memories back up to 2 days into the past. But Rintarou, still shaken by the creepy threats he's been getting, hesitates to use it. He suggests they go public with their discoveries instead. The lab crew decides to throw a party, but things heat up when Kurisu clashes with Suzuha, who insists she's meant to be a CERN spy in the future. Luckily, Mayuri steps in and cools things down. Just as a bomb threat to the rail system makes headlines, Suzuha, freaked out by the lab's link to CERN, bolts. Then, in a shocking turn, Moika shows up with a gang of armed goons, revealing herself as a rounder working for CERN. She orders Rintaro, Kurisu, and Daru to be captured, then, without hesitation, shoots Mayuri, deciding she's not worth keeping around. Moika Kiryu, with 5 armed men, announces that CERN is confiscating the lab's time machine and taking Okabe, Kurisu, and Daru into custody. When Okabe asks about Mayuri, Moika coldly says she's unnecessary and shoots Mayuri in the head. Okabe, in shock, tries to hold Mayuri's lifeless body, but Moika appears behind him, aiming a gun at his head. Suzuha bursts in, taking down the armed men and grabbing one of their guns. A tense standoff ensues with Suzuha aiming at Moika, who counters with her gun trained on Suzuha's head. Amid the standoff, Suzuha breaks the silence, telling the lab members that the time leap machine is activated. Creating a distraction, Suzuha buys enough time for Kurisu to power up the machine. Okabe insists on time leaping, despite Kurisu's concerns. Just as the leap begins, Kurisu is shot in the back. A flashback reveals Okabe and Mayuri at a cemetery. Okabe shares a memory of Mayuri visiting her grandmother's grave, waiting for her to return. One day, as sunlight surrounds Mayuri, it seems like she might disappear. Okabe rushes to her and declares for the first time that she is his hostage and can't leave. In the lab, Okabe realizes the time leap worked as he finds himself on August 13, 2010, at 4:56 p.m. After informing Kurisu and Daru the conference is cancelled, he rushes to find Mayuri. After checking several locations, he finally finds her in an alley, staring at a star. They head to the train station, where Okabe remembers the bomb threat that had shut down the trains. As they attempt to leave, a man tries to apprehend Okabe, but is unsuccessful. While running from more men, Okabe is knocked down. He urges Mayuri to keep running, but a car suddenly hits her, killing her instantly. Devastated, Okabe swears to save her and time leaps again. At 4:07 p.m. on the same day, Okabe convinces Kurisu and Daru to leave the lab. He contacts Luca to keep Mayuri at the shrine, and they evade suspicious men while heading to the subway. As they wait for the train, Mayuri's pocket watch stops. She says she has many questions but will ask later, and Okabe promises to explain everything. Just as the next train arrives, Mayuri is pushed into its path. The train stops, and Okabe, shocked, sees Nai, who pushed her by accident. Picking up Mayuri's dropped pocket watch, Okabe vows again to save her, and time leaps once more. Rintarou's attempts to save Mayuri keep falling apart, each one more hopeless than the last. Then, Moeka reveals a chilling truth. CERN is after them because of their time machine and their plans to go public with it. Despair starts to swallow Rintarou as he faces failure after failure, but then Kurisu steps in. She pushes him to open up about everything and gives him some key phrases to use on her past self to get her to work with him. After Rintarou is sent back just before the time leap machine is completed, he manages to convince Kurisu to help. But just as they think they're making progress, Suzuha shows up with a shocking revelation. She tells them the only way to save Mayuri is to escape the Alpha World Line Attractor field, where Mayuri's death is set in stone because world lines are all converging to that tragic outcome. They need to cross the 1% divergence point into the Beta World Line, where things might unfold differently. Suzuha then takes them to a crashed satellite, which turns out to be a time machine. And in a twist that blows Rintarou's mind, Suzuha reveals she's actually John Titor from the future, coming from the year 2036. Suzuha tells them that she originally planned to travel back to 1975 to grab an IBN 5100, but decided to make a detour to 2010 to search for her father instead. However, when she tries to start her time machine, it's busted. Rintarou quickly figures out it's because of the storm on the night he stopped her from leaving. Back in the past, Rintarou jumps 2 days before the time leap machine is finished and calls everyone in the lab together to spill the truth. Daru gets to work fixing Suzuha's broken machine, while Mayuri suggests they all pitch in to help Suzuha find her father, using a pin badge he gave her as a clue. Suzuha also hands Rintarou a gadget called the divergence meter, a device that tracks how much the world lines differ. She also shares how, in the future, Rintarou led the resistance against CERN. They spend the rest of the day hunting for Suzuha's father. Just as Rintaro is starting to lose hope, Suzuha thanks him. And then, a clue comes through from a badge maker who might know where her father is. Unable to get much info about the badge maker's client, Rintaro decides to leap back in time to confront the person. But to his surprise, it turns out to be Daru, who had just wanted to make a fake badge to lift Suzuha's spirits. Daru then drops a bombshell. Suzuha's time machine can only travel backward, meaning once she leaves, they won't be able to see her again. As the time machine nears completion, Mayuri figures out from the name of the machine that Suzuha's father is actually Daru. After a brief but emotional reunion, Suzuha heads back to 1975. However, Rintarou notices that the divergence meter hasn't budged. A few hours later, Yugo shows up with a letter from Suzuha, written in the year 2000. In it, she reveals that she committed suicide a year later, devastated by the failure of her mission. The crash caused by the damaged time machine wiped her memories for 24 years. Blaming himself for stopping Suzuha that stormy night, Rintarou decides to send a D-mail, stopping himself from interfering and allowing her to use the time machine before it was damaged. However, this also erases her memory of meeting her father. In the New World line, Rintarou talks to Yugo again and learns that Suzuha didn't die as she originally had in this timeline. She passed away from an illness instead. Yugo gives Rintarou Suzuha's divergence meter, which now shows a different reading. Despite the change in divergence, Mayuri's death still happens, just a day later than before. Kurisu theorizes that, since Rintarou's D-mail to stop Suzuha delayed the attack, reversing the effects of the other D-mails might bring them back to a world line where they have the IBN 5100. That way, they can hack into CERN and delete the records that have been tracking them. Rintarou begins by focusing on how to undo Ferris's D-mail. After helping her dodge a rival gang of Rynet players, he takes her to the spot where her maid cafe used to be. He starts telling her about the way Akihabara was back in the day, which sparks some of Ferris's memories from that world line. She remembers the D-mail she sent, a fake ransom note that kept her father from boarding a plane that was doomed to crash. The rival gang catches up with them, but just as things look bad, Ferris's father swoops in to rescue them. Rintarou learns from him that after the fake ransom, he had to sell the IBN 5100 to pay for the ransom, which meant the machine was gone. Coming to terms with the reality of her father's death, Ferris agrees to send a new D-mail to cancel out the old one, putting Akihabara back to its original Mo vibe. However, the IBN 5100 is still out of Rintarou's reach, slipping further away. Rintarou sits down with Luca and tells her about how she used to be male, urging her to reverse the D-mail that altered her fate, which could change Mayuri's. Luca initially refuses to believe him, but eventually agrees to send the D-mail on one condition. Rintarou has to take her on a date. Taking Kurisu and Daru's advice about dating to heart, Rintarou and Luca set off for their awkward date filled with clumsy conversation and uncomfortable silences. But as they spend time together, Luca starts to remember the previous world line, where she was male, and the memories distress her. If she returns to that world line, it means she'll have to give up on her feelings for Rintarou, which is something she's not ready to do. Before sending the D-mail to undo her first one, Rintarou realizes that the awkwardness during their date was because he'd been trying to act like someone he wasn't. With this epiphany, he takes Luca back to the shrine and spends the rest of the day training with her, just like they used to. Their bond restored, Rintarou finally sends the D-mail, shifting them back to the world line where Luca is a boy. Now, with one D-mail reversed, Rintarou moves on to the next task, undoing Mocha's D-mail. Moeka stands on a windy rooftop, holding her phone, lips pursed. The screen snaps away from her, leaving a tense silence. In the lab, the atmosphere is heavy. Daru types away, Mayuri debates how to cook ramen, and Okabe and Kurisu sit apart, silent. Mayuri invites Kurisu to a comic convention, prompting Okabe to recite Mayuri's plans in a grim tone. Kurisu, sensing his tension, drags him to the roof. There, Okabe reveals his painful truth. Mayuri will die. He can't stop it, and all he can do is wait. He explains that every undone D-mail pushes her death back a day, but it's never enough. His next target is Mocha, and he plans to undo her D-mail, but needs her phone. Kurisu offers her support, promising to help no matter how many world lines they jump through. The next day, Okabe investigates. He tracks Moika's former workplace, only to find she worked there for one day, then disappeared. He digs deeper and discovers she's dead. Suicide. The police close off her apartment. Okabe's suspicions rise. Did the Rounders kill her? As he prepares for another leap, Kurisu calls. Mayuri's dead. Time leap. Okabe finds himself in the middle of his pudding argument with Kurisu. He snaps back to the mission. Moika's life is still in danger. He heads to her apartment. The door is unlocked. Inside, Moika huddles in a corner, shaking, her phone clutched tight, typing FB over and over, pleading for orders. Okabe tries to talk, but Moika's too lost in her obsession. Frustrated, he wrestles the phone from her, breaking a table. Realization hits. This is where it all went wrong. Moika killed Mayuri in the first world line. In a moment of fury, Okabe punches Moika, kicking her against the wall, before bolting out, slamming the door shut. Moika screams and pounds on it, but Okabe doesn't listen. He calls Kurisu, telling her to power up the microwave. The D-mail is sent, but when Okabe looks around, he's still stuck in the same world line. Kurisu and Okabe are baffled. The D-mail isn't working. Okabe realizes that Moika's phone is the same one from the previous world lines, indicating the problem isn't about the phone itself. As Moika slams her table against the door in frustration, Okabe decides to interrogate her to uncover the message. He forces the door open, slams her to the ground, and kisses her to silence the noise from the woman next door. But Moika bites his lip, drawing blood. Reluctantly, she concedes and asks what she has to do to get her phone back. Okabe demands to know about her D-mail. Moika, devastated, refuses to betray them and admits her life is meaningless without FB. Okabe counters that FB doesn't even have a real relationship with her. A flashback reveals Moka's tragic past as a lonely schoolgirl who almost took her own life, until a text from FB gave her purpose. Okabe tells her that FB abandoned her, just like the world did, and that's why she's suicidal. Moka breaks down, sobbing on the floor. Okabe, softened, starts going through her messages, asking about FB's gender. Moika admits she doesn't know, having never spoken to FB on the phone, but is devoted because FB made her feel needed. Okabe finds the D-mail, a request to steal the IBN 5100 from the shrine. He and Kurisu prepare to send the D-mail to undo it, but it fails again. Realization strikes. Moika will only follow the D-mail if FB tells her to. Okabe hands Moika back her phone and declares he'll find FB himself. Moika, torn, admits she would follow FB's orders, even if it meant betraying her. Okabe, determined to fight fate, promises Moka that her suicide won't be left to chance. Just as he turns to leave, Moka finally tells him where the IBN 5100 is hidden. Despite Okabe knowing where the IBN 5100 is, Kurisu advises against trying to steal it. Instead, she suggests they stake out the place to track down FB, and Moika decides to join them. As they watch the IBN 5100 being moved, they follow it as it's passed from person to person, including Yugo, and eventually put on a plane headed for France, where CERN is located. Rintarou, Moika, and Kurisu confront Yugo, who reveals he's FB, a rounder working for CERN. He explains he's been forced into this role to protect Nai. Following the rounder code, those who fail their mission must die. Yugo kills Moka before taking his own life. Rintarou then uses Yugo's phone to send a D-mail, canceling out Moka's message. This changes the world line, bringing Moka and Yugo back to life and returning the IBN 5100 to the future Gadget Lab. But as Rintarou has Daru hack into the CERN network to erase all their data, he suddenly realizes that in doing so, he'll have to return to a world line where Kurisu is dead. Daru preps the lab, but Okabe cuts him off, rushing to the roof. Mayuri arrives, offering Okabe water and her hat for shade. She invites him to the convention, but he brushes it off, saying he's busy with the organization. After some back and forth, Okabe joins her, realizing that Mayuri's death is imminent. She offers him books about a mecha show, but he dismisses them, saying he's tied up in ninja business. Meanwhile, Kurisu is looking for one of Okabe's books for Daru, planning to sue him later. Okabe calls her, asking if they've made progress. She pushes for answers, but he hangs up, planning to save Mayuri without switching world lines. As night falls, Okabe realizes the timing. Mayuri's death is near. They wander into an alley where Mayuri asks why he's still with her. Okabe cheers up, suggesting they all do a group cosplay next time. Suddenly, a car pulls up and the clocks stop. Okabe rushes to push her out of the way, but Mayuri sacrifices herself, taking the blow and dying in Okabe's arms. Devastated, Okabe returns to the lab, placing Mayuri's body on the couch. He sees a note from Kurisu but ignores it, using the phone wave to time leap back. In a different world line, he finds Daru and Kurisu noticing his despair, halting their hacking plans. On August 15th, Okabe lies on the roof, avoiding Kurisu's concern until she finally gets him to open up. He confesses about the D-mail and Mayuri's repeated deaths, revealing his growing frustration. Kurisu urges him to go after Mayuri, and Okabe tracks her to her grandmother's grave. There, Mayuri reveals her dreams of past world lines where Okabe tries to save her but is always too late. She wonders what it all means. Okabe, moved, promises to stay by her side. They talk about their past, and Okabe admits he's been hurting. Later that night, Kurisu visits the Radio Kaikan building where Suzuha's time machine crashed. In the dark, she finds the room where she was stabbed in another world line. When Okabe finds her, they briefly talk about Mayuri, but Kurisu quickly changes the subject. Rain begins to pour, drenching them both, and they seek shelter inside. As they try to dry off, Kurisu's wet clothes reveal more than intended, much to Okabe's surprise. The tension rises when Kurisu notices Okabe's torn lab coat and offers to stitch it. She's unsure of the thread color, black, red, or pink, and after some reluctance, Okabe agrees. While she stitches, Kurisu asks why he tore it, leading Okabe to admit he searched the city for her when she didn't answer her phone. This revelation makes Kurisu smile. Once the stitching is done, Okabe dons the coat, only to discover she used pink thread. Kurisu asks if she dies in this building, leading Okabe to wonder if she remembers her death. She confesses that her memories are hazy, and she remembers him obsessing over Mayuri's fate, even at the cost of his own heart. Despite her eventual death, Kurisu asks him to return to the world line, even if it means her loss, as there's no other way. Okabe refuses and heads back to the lab to find a solution. As he prepares for another time leap, Kurisu intervenes, asking him to erase the D-mail. Okabe insists he can handle Mayuri's death, but Kurisu slaps him, claiming his heart's already broken. She argues that letting her go will break him even more. Overcome with emotion, Okabe hugs her, realizing how much she means to him. In a moment of clarity, Okabe confesses his love. Kurisu, taken aback, kisses him, claiming it's for memory's sake. He then asks for another kiss, and they share a passionate moment. The next day, as Kurisu prepares to leave for America, Okabe gives her a bamboo copter camera. She reluctantly accepts and throws him a soda bottle as a final gesture. She mouths something to him as she leaves, but when Okabe looks back, she's gone. Later, back at the lab, Daru hacks into CERN to delete the D-mail. Okabe is about to erase it when Kurisu bursts in, desperate to confess her love. But before she can speak, Okabe's reading Steiner activates, and he finds himself back in the same place, where no one remembers Kurisu. Overcome with emotion, Okabe questions if this is truly for the best. As he ships away his lab equipment, Daru gets a call from someone claiming to be connected to him, Suzuha, who urgently needs Okabe's help to prevent World War III. Rintarou Okabe never opens the movie mail from his future self. Instead, Mayuri Shiina desperately pleads with Suzuha Amane to stop relying on Okabe to prevent World War III. In this altered timeline, Okabe ultimately goes on to create Operation Skuld and the movie mail, which aids the original Okabe in thwarting the impending world line convergence. In doing so, he successfully averts both Kurisu Makise's tragic death and the devastating World War III, ultimately guiding them into the Steins Gate world line, a reality where everything finally falls into place. Okabe returns utterly shattered, his usual bravado replaced by gut-wrenching sobs. Suzuha steps forward, ready to slap some sense into him, but Mayuri cuts her off, shielding him with an outstretched arm. She kneels beside him, wrapping him in a hug that feels both fragile and unbreakable. Whispering softly, she tells him it's okay to cry, that she's here for him. His sobs echo through the room, raw and unfiltered, as the camera pans outward, showing how small and insignificant they all seem against the crushing enormity of their world. The scene fades to black, and we find Okabe alone in the dark, a broken shadow of himself. The visuals blur as muffled clips of Kurisu's voice overlap and swirl in his mind, building into an overwhelming, surreal cacophony. Then, silence. A clock ticks relentlessly in the void, and we see his lab coat discarded on the floor, a haunting symbol of his lost identity. Weeks pass. Summer has long since faded, but Mayuri still clings to its remnants in her light clothes, while Okabe stands beside her in his all-black Zero outfit, a physical embodiment of despair. He's throwing himself into university life, answering mundane calls instead of indulging in the playful conversations that once defined him. His exhaustion is evident, but Mayuri's cheerful presence softens the edges. She hasn't seen him in a while and is happy to catch even this fleeting moment with him. As they part ways, she asks him to stop by the lab. He hesitates, the weight of the past dragging him down, but her hopeful gaze pushes him to agree. As he walks away, Mayuri's raised hand lowers slowly, her smile fading into quiet concern. The city looms around Okabe, indifferent and unchanged. He thinks bitterly that nothing, not the streets, not the people, not even himself, has truly moved forward. His thoughts churn, an uncomfortable noise building in his mind until it drowns everything else. Later, Okabe meets Amadeus Kurisu. His face betrays every ounce of his raw pain, disbelief, and grief, all colliding at this impossible reunion. Okabe, Daru, and Mayuri make their way to the rooftop of the radio building, where Suzuha has successfully landed her time machine. Daru, confused at first, thinks it's a transformable robot, but Okabe quickly clears that up. Suzuha, eager to fix the future, asks Okabe to help her go back in time and stop World War III. Okabe, however, is reluctant. He's grown used to life without time travel and reminds Suzuha that Kurisu is already dead. But Suzuha insists the key to preventing the war lies in saving Kurisu. If they do, they'll create a new world line, Steins Gate. Okabe is skeptical, even though Suzuha points out that he's the one who originally theorized it. After some convincing from Mayuri and Daru, Okabe reluctantly agrees, leaving his phone with Mayuri. Once inside the time machine, Okabe learns that not only can it travel back in time, but also forward. With a passenger's seat, this world line is different from Suzuha's 2036. With coordinates set, Suzuha activates the machine and they begin their journey, surrounded by beads of time floating around them. They arrive in the past on July 28, 2010, at 11:51 p.m. Okabe feels dizzy, but Suzuha rushes to break the door open with her pistol. The plan: Okabe must save Kurisu while keeping an eye on Dr. Nakabachi, all while avoiding his past self. As Okabe walks into the building, he spots his past self heading for the roof and follows him, narrowly avoiding a mental breakdown when he runs into past Kurisu. After a quick encounter, Okabe races toward the press conference, careful not to disrupt Kurisu's path. In a closet, Okabe hides as he watches the tragic events unfold. Kurisu's father, Dr. Nakabachi, is revealed to be the one who kills her after a heated argument over the time machine paper. Okabe, desperate, leaps out and attacks Nakabachi, but chaos erupts. In a tragic twist, Okabe accidentally stabs Kurisu as she tries to stop her father, and she dies in his arms, leaving Okabe devastated. Back in the present, Okabe is broken. Suzuha tries to rally him, saying they have one more chance, but Okabe, lost in trauma, refuses. Just then, they get a message. Nakabachi has sought asylum in Russia, revealing that the time machine papers are causing global panic. The resulting fear of time travel leads to World War III and 5.7 billion deaths. Okabe, heartbroken, believes he can't change anything, but Mayuri slaps him, urging him not to give up. Suzuha then tells Okabe to watch a video file sent on July 28th. The file, glitchy and unseen before, shows future Okabe, explaining that Okabe must experience Kurisu's death to connect with his future self. Future Okabe gives him two instructions: destroy the time machine paper and save Kurisu. Okabe hesitates but understands that to fix the future, he must deceive his past self into thinking Kurisu is dead, while keeping everything else unchanged. Future Okabe then reveals that the time machine is called C-2104, named after Christina, a nod to Kurisu. He also shares that the world line they aim for is Steins Gate, and the key to reaching it is to deceive the world and his past self. Okabe, now accepting the mission, revives his Hoin Kyoma persona and prepares for Operation Scold, knowing the fate of the world is in his hands. As everyone gets ready, Suzuha reveals the time machine can only make one more jump, and she'll be stuck in the past if they fail. Okabe, feeling for her, reassures her that if things go wrong, she'll still be part of the lab as lab member number 008. He then declares the start of the mission, but suddenly remembers he forgot something important and rushes back to the lab. There, he finds the glow-stick lightsaber, planning to use its liquid as a substitute for Kurisu's blood. The others are skeptical, but Okabe insists it's perfect, scaring everyone with his confidence. Mayuri then brings up Kurisu and wonders if she used to sit in Okabe's chair. Suzuha thinks it's Mayuri's reading Steiner kicking in, but Okabe explains that anyone can have memories shifted to another world line. In the process, Okabe accidentally admits that he and Kurisu had feelings for each other, causing Daru to be confused, but Mayuri just melts. Later, as they prepare for the time jump, Daru keeps asking who Suzuha's mom and his wife is, but she shuts him down again. At 11:51 p.m., Okabe and Suzuha arrive in the past. Okabe sends Suzuha with the glow stick while he heads to the 7th floor to grab the metal UPA so Nakabachi's paper burns. He succeeds and swaps the UPA with past Mayuri's green one. He then heads to the 4th floor, where he has to mimic his past self to avoid altering Kurisu's memory. But in a slip-up, he mutters that he's there to save her, making the situation awkward. He watches as Kurisu picks up the green UPA, realizing Nakabachi stole it from her too. Next, Okabe heads to the closet where Kurisu dies, planning to knock her out with a taser and let past Okabe be fooled again. However, disaster strikes. The lightsaber fluid is dried up. Desperate, he looks at his own hand. As Nakabachi throws Kurisu to the floor, Okabe jumps up, delivering a dramatic Hoin Kyuma speech. Nakabachi pulls a knife, but Okabe mocks him, calling him a coward. Enraged, Nakabachi stabs Okabe in the stomach, and the needed blood leaks out. Okabe kicks Nakabachi to the ground, takes the knife, and threatens him, forcing Nakabachi to flee with the paper. Kurisu tries calling an ambulance, but Okabe, still determined to save her, knocks her out with the taser. He then pulls out enough blood from his own stomach to make it work and arranges her body as needed. Suzuha arrives just in time, helping him out. Okabe asks her to stay hidden behind a corner to make sure past Okabe gets to Kurisu, wishing him luck for the hardest weeks of his life. Suzuha gets Okabe back into the time machine, scolding him for being so reckless. As they head back to the present, it's like they can read each other's thoughts. Okabe wonders if they've reached Steins Gate. Suzuha doesn't know, but she's sure the paper being burned means World War III is off the table. She fades away, saying thank you and promising to meet him again in 2017. Back in the present, Mayuri finds Okabe's hospital room empty and goes looking for him. She visits several places, meeting up with lab members who now wear pins from the science conference as a symbol of their bond. She arrives at the lab, where Daru has her lab member badge ready, and he's saved Suzuha's badge for when she's born. Mayuri looks forward to all the fun they'll have, certain that nothing will truly change. Meanwhile, Okabe walks down the street, reflecting on Kurisu and the fact that she probably has no memories of their time together in the otherworld lines. He's made peace with it. After all, as long as she's alive and CERN is gone, it's all worth it. He's walking past the now restored science building when by chance he runs into Kurisu, who's been looking for him to thank him for saving her life. They stop to talk, and Okabe, with a smile, encrypts a message in his phone saying he wants to stay by her side and ending it with El Sai Kongru. He calls her Christina again, and in that moment, her memories flood back. She remembers everything. Okabe welcomes her back, holding out a lab pin for her, reaffirming their love. As they embrace, Okabe reflects that space-time is infinite, and that their reunion is proof that no matter what happens, the right choice was made. This is the true Steins Gate. Okabe stumbles through the desert, feeling like his time has run out. He starts talking to himself on the phone again, realizing his current situation is all part of the Steins Gate choice. He decides to keep wandering. 2 weeks earlier. Back at the lab, Okabe and Mayuri are hanging out when Daru walks in wearing a Luffy hat and a Hawaiian shirt. Okabe jokes about Daru wanting to join the Yakuza or go on a safari, but it turns out he's just getting ready for a trip to Los Angeles. Ferris invited the group to watch her in a Rainet competition, and Daru is all dressed up for the occasion. Mayuri gets a text from Kurisu saying she'll visit, but only if they have to bring Okabe. The group visits Mr. Braun, Nei, and Moika. Nei asks for a gift, and Moika awkwardly texts Okabe to avoid macadamia nuts, then asks for chocolate instead. Kurisu arrives, and when they check in at the airport, the officer asks why they're visiting. Okabe, not understanding, declares himself a mad scientist. The cops arrest him for being mentally unstable. After he escapes, Okabe sees Kurisu again and forgets to greet her, quickly brushing it off with a silly comment about thinking she was a spy. Kurisu rolls her eyes and tells everyone to get in the car, but Okabe insists on a taxi. Kurisu drives off, leaving Okabe to take a taxi and try to make her think he ran all the way there. She sees through his act. Ferris arrives and questions why Okabe canceled their hotel. He goes on a rant about being hunted by the organization and gets arrested again for his trouble. Okabe, Mayuri, and Daru crash at Kurisu's place, quickly making themselves at home in ways Kurisu doesn't like. Later, Okabe learns Kurisu has decided to leave the time travel research to him and admits she has no memories of other world lines, except the one they're in. Kurisu blushes when Okabe asks if she has any more substantial memories, but quickly changes the topic. Kurisu finds them a motel, but it's a dump. Okabe and Luca refuse to stay, joking that Norman Bates might be lurking. Kurisu insists they have no choice, so they end up bunking in weird pairings. Okabe and Daru, Mayuri and Luca, and Kurisu alone. Okabe and Daru start bickering and decide to do rock, paper, scissors to see who sleeps in the car. Okabe loses but finds Kurisu outside, and after some awkward silence, she invites him to talk inside. The next day at the Rainet tournament, Ferris wins big, while Daru cheers her on. Okabe sits in a cafe, and Kurisu reluctantly serves him food, having become a waitress to pay for their tickets. They argue, and Okabe tells her he's glad she's feeling better after last night, but insists they leave the memories from other world lines alone. Kurisu, looking sad, says those memories aren't real. Okabe steps outside for another soda and spots a girl who looks and sounds like Suzuha. He follows her, hoping time travel exists in this world line. But after talking to her, Okabe realizes she's not Suzuha, just a tourist. The girl talks about how a psychic once told her she'd marry and have a daughter in 7 years. Okabe realizes she's Daru's future wife and Suzuha's mom. After seeing her off, Okabe starts thinking about Suzuha and realizes he's stuck with only 67 cents and no phone charge. With no other choice, Okabe begins walking back. As night falls, he thinks about Kurisu and starts running, only to faceplant on the pavement. Thinking he's about to die, Okabe regrets not telling Kurisu about their past romance. Right then, Kurisu appears, worried about him. They both realize they're stuck in the desert because Kurisu forgot to fill the car with gas. Okabe explains why he left, and Kurisu is relieved, thinking he didn't leave because of her comment about the other world lines not being real. She asks about her dream memories and why one feels so real. Okabe guesses it's because that memory was real. He confesses his love again and asks how she feels. Kurisu, unsure of her feelings because she doesn't have the reading Steiner, says she's not sure. Okabe, explaining that the other world lines are real to him and she was always his constant, just wants to know how she feels in this world line. Standing up, Kurisu asks him to close his eyes, and with that, they complete the choice of Steins Gate. In an abandoned building, Suzuha approaches Mayuri and tells her that her father and others are looking for her, as they are about to kick off the operation. Thereafter, Mayuri expresses her regret for not holding Hikoboshi's hand, wondering if the future would have been different. Later, Okabe is going through his hypnotherapy session. After being done, he walks out of the center and is approached by Mayuri. They then continue to take a stroll where Okabe suggests that they go grab a bite. Since Ferris and Ruka have already invited Mayuri over to Akiba, she suggests to Okabe that they go there, to which he agrees. Over at Akiba, Mayuri gets a message from Yuki, discovering that she wants to talk about something with them at the lab. Back at Suzuha's house, she and her dad, Daru, engage in a back and forth over Daru's trolling on the internet. Soon, the bell rings, and Suzuha immediately goes into hiding, realizing that it's Yuki, and she does not want to show herself to her. Yuki then steps inside, followed by Mayuri and others arriving as well. Thereafter, Okabe decides to head to the bathroom but gets stopped by Daru, who tries not to give Suzuha's hidden location away. However, Okabe decides to go inside anyway. As expected, he gets jumped over by Suzuha, who then holds him with a headlock. Just then, everyone finds out that Suzuha is there as well. Later at the rooftop, Suzuha explains to Okabe how she does not think that Yuki will be happy to know that she is her future daughter. But Okabe thinks otherwise, believing that Yuki might feel something. Thereafter, Suzuha explains to Okabe how she and her family were labeled as rebels. Furthermore, she reveals that they were not able to escape as her mother got obliterated by a machine gun while trying to defend Suzuha. She then tries to convince Okabe to fix the past, but Okabe refuses, mentioning that it's quite dangerous. In response, Suzuha leaves angrily, telling Okabe that she hasn't given up yet. Later on the bus, Okabe receives a notification from his colleagues inviting him to drinks. Okabe decides to accept the invitation, and Mayuri assures him that she will be fine on her own. After the drinks, Okabe leaves to head home. Along the way, he begins having hallucinations from his past, where a girl repeatedly tells him that she doesn't want to die. With her death imminent, Okabe is unable to do anything. Thereafter, he sees the many dead bodies of the same girl, prompting him to quickly snap back to reality. The following day, Okabe heads to the conference hall. There, he decides to work at the front desk. Shortly after, a tiny woman calls out for him, but he has no idea where the voice is coming from. After looking down, Okabe sees the woman. He quickly believes that the girl is underage and reminds her that this is a college seminar. The girl then pulls out her identity card to show that she is 21 years old and a grown woman, named Maho Hiajo. After directing her to the staff room, Okabe spots Mocha from his visions and starts to panic. But he quickly calms down, recalling that this is a beta world line. The conference soon starts, with Maho acting as an interpreter for the American professor who is presenting. He explains that their current project is based on research that Kurisu did while she was alive, the same research that allowed her to create a time machine that projected a user's consciousness into the past is now being used to create an AI called Amadeus, based on a human's memories. To demonstrate Amadeus, Maho tries to load the system, but it is taking some time. This causes researchers from the crowd to begin speaking up, telling Maho that it is near impossible to achieve what she has just said. Hearing this, Okabe is unable to control himself as he stands up and lashes out at the researcher, telling him that they cannot rule out something that they haven't even tried yet. The American professor, Alexis Leskinen, then claps for Okabe's bravery, but advises him to stay calm until the project is completed. Maho then presents Amadeus, who runs an AI version of herself that was implanted with her memories 4 days ago, demonstrating that it is capable of its own decisions and behaves just like a human. Following the seminar, Okabe speaks with Maho about the project. During their conversation, Maho discovers that Okabe was once an acquaintance of Kurisu, another researcher in the Amadeus project. They then take their conversation at a table. There, Maho suddenly begins to cry as she reminisces about her past memories with Kurisu. Thereafter, Leskinen approaches the two, asking Maho if they are having a love quarrel. However, Maho explains that she is crying on her own as they are discussing Kurisu. This prompts Leskinen to realize that Okabe is an acquaintance of Kurisu. Hearing about this, Leskinen and Maho invite Okabe to converse with an Amadeus AI formed from Kurisu's memories of 8 months ago prior to her death. Coming to the lab, Okabe is greeted by Maho, who then takes him inside. She even tells Okabe that Amadeus will make sure to replicate Kurisu's memories, along with her behavior, causing a person to easily succumb to delusion. She even explains to Okabe that the Kurisu he will see won't be a real person. Even after all these, Okabe still agrees to meet with Amadeus. Shortly after, they make their way into the room where Maho and Okabe engage in a conversation. Suddenly, Amadeus appears on the computer screen, asking Okabe what's so funny. Seeing her, memories flash before Okabe's eyes as he recalls about Kurisu. Their conversation continues with Amadeus's version of Kurisu teasing Maho with some secret joke. However, Maho abruptly backs off from the conversation, telling Kurisu that there's no such thing. Confused, Okabe has no idea what these girls are talking about. Suddenly, Leskinen arrives inside the room as well. Engaging in a conversation with him, Okabe accidentally mispronounces, prompting Kurisu to joke about it. In response, Okabe abruptly turns around, calling Kurisu Christina. When the three begin to push Okabe, he tries to find a way out of it. Later, Leskinen asks for a favor from Okabe. He asks him to converse with Amadeus from time to time, so they can use it as data. He even offers Okabe to talk with Amadeus whenever he wants, adding that he only has to talk with her twice a month and report back to Leskinen. Also, Leskinen asks Okabe to just deny the offer if that's how he feels, but Okabe accepts the offer. After a while, Okabe meets with Mayuri. There, she reveals that they are planning to throw a huge Christmas party for Suzuha to help cheer her mood. But Okabe warns her that Suzuha won't like it. They then continue to take a stroll. In the middle of it, Okabe receives a phone call from Amadeus. After picking it up, Kurisu scolds Okabe for ignoring her. Moreover, she assures him that he can call her anytime but explains that she might be busy sometimes. Ending the phone call, Okabe is unable to hold back his tears after recalling the moody behavior of Kurisu when she was alive. Mayuri takes all the girls in on her plan to throw a Christmas party for Suzuha. She even explains how she is going to make Santa suits. Yuki then comments how Okabe would love to see Mayuri in a suit like that, prompting her to question why. Yuki then explains to everyone that Mayuri is Okabe's girlfriend, but Mayuri clarifies all the misunderstandings, revealing that she and Okabe are just childhood friends. She further clarifies that Okabe already has someone that he likes. Later, Okabe is engaged in a phone call with Kurisu, where she scolds him for being evasive, wanting to see the lab, and even reminding him that her old self also went there once. Okabe then receives a phone call from Mayuri in the middle of his conversation, prompting him to hang up on Kurisu. Mayuri then asks Okabe to help her carry the shopping bags as they are too heavy, leading Okabe to ask her to meet at the lab. After that, Okabe gives Kurisu a tour of the city. Upon reaching the radio building, Okabe instantly turns around, prompting Kurisu to grow even more curious. He then makes his way to his lab and begins showing Kurisu around. Suddenly, Mayuri arrives, causing Okabe to abruptly end the phone call. Thereafter, Mayuri reveals to Okabe that everyone has agreed to come to the party. Over at the time machine, Suzuha thanks Faris for renting the place. Suzuha then realizes that she has to take Okabe in their mission if they really want to make it to the Steins gate. Coming back to the facility, Leskinen tells Maho that they are going to hold a meeting on Christmas Eve, where Okabe will report to them about Amadeus. There, Maho shows concern regarding Okabe. Later, Okabe continues to give Kurisu a tour of the city. There, she pushes Okabe to tell her why he called Christina, adding that she is going to continue asking him until she gets the answer. Suddenly, Leskinen and Maho spot Okabe and invite him over to a bite. During this, Okabe explains how his progress has been going so far with Amadeus. Silently, Kurisu asks Maho to make a move on Okabe, but Okabe reveals that he has to attend a Christmas party, causing Leskinen to grow excited. Okabe then brings Leskinen and Maho over to his lab for the party. There, he also discovers that Daru is trying to convince Suzuha to attend the party as well. After a while, Daru manages to trick Suzuha into coming to the lab. Just then, the group tries to surprise Suzuha while she jumps on Yuki, not knowing what's going on. Yuki then explains to her that she was just trying to surprise her. Suzuha then calms herself down and tells the group to enjoy themselves, stating that she is not going to stay. However, Okabe steps in, convincing Suzuha to stay and enjoy the party. The party is now going in full flow, but Okabe seems distracted. Mayuri even notices that but decides to ignore it. She then tells Okabe that the gift distribution is about to begin. In response, Okabe tells her that he is going to be back soon. He then makes his way to the rooftop, where he engages in a conversation with Kurisu over a phone call. There, Okabe explains to Kurisu that he called her Christina to tease her. Meanwhile, Mayuri grows worried and decides to check up on Okabe, followed by Maho. Overhearing the phone call, Maho decides to take action, grabbing the phone from Okabe's grasp and ending the call. She then gives him a hard reality check, telling Okabe that Kurisu is dead. Before the Christmas party chaos began, Rintarou had a chilling nightmare set in the 1.382733 Beta world line, where the Soviet Union had invaded Japan in 2010. Surrounded by lifeless bodies and the terrifying sight of armed soldiers closing in, he gasps for air. The enemy patrol spots him, urging him to run, but it's too late. His guards are shot, and Rintarou collapses. When he wakes up, he's in a strange office, face to face with a man. As a phone rings, his hesitation is met with the man's approval. He picks up the call, and that's when his reading Steiner jolts him back to reality. Back on the roof of his lab, shaken and still racing from the nightmare, Rintarou rushes downstairs to find Mayuri, haunted by memories of her deaths in the Alpha Attractor field. His heart calms when he finds her safe. Later, during a meeting with Alexis Leskinen and Maho, Rintarou opens a Christmas gift, finding a dress inside, which Kurisu teases him about. He wonders why she wasn't mad at him for hanging up earlier, and she casually mentions he called her back immediately, though Rintarou has no memory of it. When Leskinen arrives, apologizing for the late hour, they discuss his gift to Rintarou. Rintarou hesitates before revealing it, but Kurisu insists there's no need to hide. Leskinen shares his hopes for Kurisu's feelings to develop, but Rintarou dismisses it. After all, Kurisu's just an AI. Leskinen explains Amadeus, a system that models human brains from memories and could eventually experience emotions like love. On the train, Maho presses Rintarou about his past with Kurisu, wondering if they were lovers. Rintarou denies it, the memory of failing to save her still raw. Maho apologizes, realizing she might have hit a nerve. Meanwhile, a red laptop and hard drive on her desk hint at something deeper. After cleaning, Ferris suggests tea at May Queen Nian Squared, but Mayuri hesitates. Luca can't join, as his father's guests are visiting. Mayuri teases him, and the group wonders where Daru is. He's with Suzuha in the lab, talking about something important. Suzuha slips on the cozy sheep fur gloves she got for Christmas, and surprises Daru by suggesting he invite Yuki to the shows he bought. Daru asks why she's been avoiding the lab and radio buildings, and Suzuha hesitates before revealing she's searching for a girl she was separated from in 1998, someone who came with her from 2036. Later, at May Queen, Daru fills Rintarou in on the girl Suzuha's looking for. Rintarou figures she'd be 22 by now and mentions how Suzuha had almost given up, but found a photo online, suspecting it could be her. Daru reveals her name, Shiina Kagari. Shocked, Rintarou asks who the father is. Daru reassures him that Kagari is a war orphan adopted by Mayuri in the future. He also mentions that peacekeepers from 2036 are after them because of Rintarou's time machine project. Flashes of the future show Daru urging Suzuha to hurry as the peacekeepers approach. Mayuri insists Suzuha take Kagari and protect her. Kagari, unwilling to part with her mother, struggles, but Mayuri insists for her safety. Suzuha and Kagari travel through time to 1975, then 1998, and finally to 2010. Rintarou, after some thought, agrees to help find Kagari. He wonders about his reading Steiner activation and whether the world line shifted. A news report mentions Japan's upcoming cabinet meeting with Russia due to Dr. Nakabachi's defection last summer. At Tokyo Denki University, Rintarou asks Amadeus, Kurisu, for ideas on locating a missing person from 12 years ago. She suggests contacting the police or hiring a detective, but Rintarou remembers Maho's comment about Kurisu being dead and hangs up. In 1998 Akihabara, Suzuha explains to Kagari how the Y2K crisis was caused by the IBN 5100, and they must prevent it to safeguard the future. Kagari questions whether changing the past is okay, fearing it could alter their future. Suzuha assures her it's necessary for reaching Steins Gate. Kagari suddenly points a gun at Suzuha, warning her that a shadow told her not to change the future. Suzuha acts fast, trying to stop her. In the lab, Suzuha asks Daru about the progress of his search. He tells her he's checked the police records for missing people, but found nothing. She asks if he's spoken to Rintarou about it. Daru confirms Rintarou agreed to help and will do what he can. Suzuha thanks him for his help in finding Kagari. After consulting Amadeus, Rintarou heads to the library to dig through old newspapers. Kurisu calls him again, and he rushes out to answer. She teases him for ignoring her again, and he reassures her he was just in the library. She offers to help him search for the missing person using the Amadeus server, which connects directly to Victor Chandria University's research building. Though hesitant, Rintarou agrees to think about it. Ferris and Luca spot Rintarou on the bridge. Rintarou rarely sees them together. Ferris explains Luca's father asked them to pick up a few things for some guests staying over. They offer to carry the items, but Luca declines. Rintaro asks for their help in finding the girl. Later, Ferris tells Rintaro she found no leads from Kuroki, but she did hear about a ghost in braids seen around the radio building asking about a little girl. Just then, Rintaro spots Leskinen in the hallway and follows him, but he disappears. Back in the lab, Suzuha says she doesn't want to burden Daru or Rintaro anymore. Daru insists that if they're looking for someone, they might as well bring in a specialist. Suzuha is reluctant, thinking it's better if fewer people know, but Daru has already contacted someone nearby. Rintaro gets a call from Luca, wanting to meet for advice, but Rintaro tells him he's busy and has to call him back. Daru's contact arrives, a woman with long red hair, dressed just like the one in the photo Rintaro and Daru had seen. When Rintaro opens the door, he's shocked to see Moika Kiryu. Memories of the Alpha World line, where Moika killed Mayuri, flood back. Moika politely asks if she can come in. Moika appears, and Daru is apparently familiar with her due to third-party interviews in which Daru was asked about Akiba urban legends. Daru apparently has called her here in order to help aid in the search for Mayuri Shiina, and Okabe thinks multiple times about whether or not it is really a good idea to ask her to help, even considering the possibility that she is still a rounder in this world line. Despite his misgivings, he agrees to have her help, and curiously, her walking after departing the lab is animated with a sharp, dark gradient shadowing her face. Suzuha then asks Okabe if he knows Moka already, since it is obvious from his demeanor, but does not pry further when Okabe remains reticent. At the Brain Science Institute, Maho is shown to be quite worried about Okabe after hearing that he has not conversed with Amadeus since she had bluntly reminded him that Kurisu is already dead. She decides to go to Akihabara to visit Okabe and is inquired teasingly by Leskinen regarding what her intentions are. Maho stubbornly attempts to maintain that she is going there for a change of pace and that she might as well go visit Okabe while she's there. Back at the lab, Moka has apparently compiled her report, the primary observations of which were that it would not be easy to find Mayuri Shiina, and second, that other people had been searching for her for the past few months, some of them foreigners. From this information, Okabe conjectures that she must still be alive. In the next scene, Maho is shown to be in front of Akihabara Station, where she begins to compose a message asking if she can visit the lab. However, she is interrupted by a sinking feeling that a certain man is following her in a suit and immediately begins to walk. After seemingly being unable to shake off the person tailing her, she sprints and runs into an alleyway, where a person with a long winter jacket follows her. Seeing that she is visibly being followed, Maho once again begins sprinting, and the pursuing woman quickens her pace. Maho calls Okabe and tells him that she is near the lab before being cut off by the sound of a shocked whimper. Okabe, suspecting a possible attack similar to that on Mayuri from the previous world line, proceeds to immediately grab the lightsaber gadget and look for Maho. He comes across Maho's dropped belongings and subsequently finds Maho in the grip of the woman from before. It is then revealed that the woman is Judy Reyes, a colleague of Maho's and Leskinen. Apparently, Reyes merely saw Maho run into the alleyway and thought to surprise her, which leads to Maho wondering if she was imagining the person who followed her. Later, Maho tells Okabe that he has no reason to continue talking with Kurisu, questioning why he is not picking up her calls. Okabe then tells Maho to give him some time, assuring that he will sort this out on his own. Later at the lab, Mayuri heads outside as it begins snowing, telling Okabe that Ruka wants to talk to him. Shortly after, Okabe tries to get in contact with Ruka but is unable to do so. Suddenly, Ruka enters the lab, telling Okabe that he has brought someone along that he wants Okabe to meet. Upon seeing this person, Okabe stands in shock as the girl resembles a lot in Kurisu. After a while, Ruka explains that this is the guest he told Okabe about. Ruka further explains to Okabe that Kana has no memories from her past, as she has amnesia and doesn't even know her real name. Therefore, he asks for Okabe's help. Kana then hands over an upa that she has been keeping close to her for a very long time to help Okabe find out more about her. Thereafter, Mayuri arrives, followed by Suzuha. The latter immediately recognizes Kana as Mayuri Shiina. Kana's sudden wake-up shocked everyone, especially Rintaro. Her recovery made her earlier collapse feel pointless. His mind raced with doubts. Kagari's presence was unsettling, and Suzuha wasn't buying it either. For all they knew, Kagari could be a dangerous spy hiding behind a harmless face, ready to shatter their fragile lives. Suzuha had the tricky job of explaining all this to Mayuri and Rukako, two normal, clueless people who had no idea about time travel. Mayuri stayed sweet and cheerful, her kindness almost too perfect to be true. Rintaro appreciated it, but he couldn't help craving someone with a bit more depth, especially now. On top of that, he decided to trust Moeka, something that made no sense. He asked her to look into the group hunting Kagari, but was it smart to tell someone he didn't trust much? Maho was fed up with her colleagues, who wouldn't stop teasing her about her feelings for Rintaro. She was a brilliant scientist, but to them, her love life was the only thing that mattered. Meanwhile, Rintaro's instructions to Rukako on protecting Kagari were annoyingly vague, making Rukako even more nervous and unprepared for the job. The group tried to act normal, but their visit to the New Year's shrine was filled with tension. Kagari's sudden appearance felt too strange for Suzuha, and she stayed on edge, knowing shady forces were still lurking. Rintaro's past failures hit him at random moments, dragging him down. Maho's confusion about Rukako's gender only added to the weird vibe of the day. Things took a darker turn when Maho introduced Amadeus to the group. The AI suddenly shut down in the middle of their chat, its server unreachable. The mood shifted as creepy music played, and Mayuri's watch stopped. Rintaro's anxiety spiked. Before they could react, masked intruders burst in, guns raised. The armed men make a move to grab Kagari, but their attempt is quickly thwarted when Yugo Tenuji storms in like a one-man army, disarming them with brutal precision. Realizing these guys weren't the same rounders he'd tangled with before, Rintaro strides up to Tenuji, playing his trump card, his knowledge that Tenuji is tied to a secret rounder group linked to CERN. Rintaro, desperate, pitches the idea of working together to protect Kagari, hoping this uneasy alliance might give them the upper hand. Meanwhile, Maho's frustration grows as she remains locked out of Amadeus, feeling the walls closing in. Luca, feeling left in the dark, presses Suzuha for answers, eager to know what's being hidden from him. The tension is palpable. Everyone's secrets are beginning to pile up. Then, just when things couldn't get crazier, Rintaro receives a sudden, panicked distress call from Amadeus. His heart races as his reading Steiner kicks in, and before he knows it, he's ripped out of his world and thrown into an alternate reality, a world where Kurisu is still alive. The shift is jarring, leaving him breathless as he realizes the full weight of the situation. He's in a completely different world line, and nothing will ever be the same again. Okabe is crushed by grief, mourning the loss of Mayuri. He's drowning in sorrow when Kurisu walks into the lab, and in his clouded mind, he mistakes her for Mayuri. Without thinking, he pulls her into a tight hug, sobbing uncontrollably, calling out for Mayuri as if she's still there. Kurisu stands there, frozen, unsure of what to do. She gently tries to console him, urging him to move on from Mayuri. She tells him he can't keep living in the past, but Okabe isn't ready to hear it. His heart is torn, flooded with guilt over the choice he made to save Kurisu, which led directly to Mayuri's death. He feels lost, caught between guilt and an unending sadness. As he struggles to make sense of his thoughts, the reality hits him hard. This is an alpha world line, a world where Mayuri will die no matter what he does. There's no escape, no changing her fate. He turns to Kurisu, asking about the phone microwave, hoping for some answer. Kurisu quietly informs him that it was him who destroyed it when he had a mental breakdown. Kurisu watches him with suspicion as he suddenly stands up, announcing he needs to clear his mind. As he stands in the lab, he notices he's sitting on the spot where Mayuri always used to sit. It hits him hard. He's never dared to take her spot on the couch before. Now it's just empty space, a reminder of his loss. He leaves the lab and heads to a nearby park, lost in thought. Staring at his phone, he realizes the bitter truth. This timeline won't let Mayuri live. No matter what he does, she's gone. He wonders how he even ended up in this timeline in the first place. Suddenly, he hears a familiar voice, Daru calling his name. Daru approaches with that old friendly grin, inviting Okabe to their usual cafe. Daru sees how bad Okabe is feeling and drags him to their usual cafe, the one where Mayuri used to help out. When the girls notice Okabe, they're shocked, but Rumiho runs straight up and hugs him, greeting him warmly. Okabe takes a seat with them, but as they talk, the memories of Mayuri hit hard. The once lively cafe feels heavy and sad again, the atmosphere thick with loss. Out of nowhere, Okabe blurts out that it would be great if there was a world line where Mayuri was still alive. Daru's face darkens, and before Okabe can say more, he's yanked outside and pinned harshly to the wall. Daru's voice is cold and firm as he tells Okabe that Mayuri died because he couldn't make the hard choice. He couldn't press the key. In that moment, everything clicks for Okabe. The weight of the situation finally crashes down on him. After a long, silent walk home, Daru fills Kurisu in on what happened, and she quickly realizes that the Okabe standing in front of them is from a different world line. Without missing a beat, Kurisu starts fixing the phone microwave, determined to help him. She eventually presents it to Okabe, offering him a chance to send a message back to his original world line, a chance to fix everything. Okabe's mind races as he stares at the device. He's shocked by how quickly Kurisu figured him out, but when he thinks about it, he refuses. Sending the message would mean saving Mayuri and condemning Kurisu. The thought churns his stomach. He can't make that choice. Kurisu understands the torment in his eyes. The next day, she invites him out, guiding him to Shiina's grave. She tells him he needs to make a decision. He can't keep carrying this guilt or it'll crush him. Okabe stares at the grave, emotions swelling inside him, and then the tears come. Just as he starts to break down, a bright light shines down from the sky, directly illuminating Shiina's grave. In that moment, Okabe understands this is a sign from Mayuri. With a heavy heart, he agrees to go to the lab with Kurisu. Back in the lab, the guilt surges again, threatening to pull him back. He almost refuses, almost doesn't press the button. But then, Kurisu leans in and kisses him, her lips soft yet firm, and with that kiss, she presses the send button for him. Everything starts to shift. The world begins to blur, and Okabe feels himself slipping back to the world he came from. Kurisu watches him, a soft smile on her face. She knows that no matter what happens, she's accepted her fate. But in this moment, she's happy to see Okabe go back to the world he's always wanted, where Mayuri can live and where his guilt might finally let him breathe again. Okabe wakes up and realizes he's back in his original world line. He rushes out of the room, his heart racing, and finds himself in a hospital hallway. As he looks around, he sees his friends and Mayuri walking toward him. The truth hits him like a punch. Everything that happened in the Alpha world feels like a dream, a haunting one at that. His friends ask what happened when he suddenly fainted, but Okabe is lost in confusion. Still dazed from the memories of the past, he turns to Mayuri and asks if she remembers Kurisu. To his surprise, Mayuri responds that Kurisu is just the name of his AI system. The words hit Okabe hard, and disappointment washes over him. Later, they visit Fubuki-chan, who had fainted at the same time as Okabe. Fubuki reveals that she also had a dream where Mayuri died, and their world line continued in that painful loop. Okabe realizes that Fubuki, too, has memories of the Alpha world, and a wave of worry crashes over him. He fears that his actions have disturbed the world lines. Meanwhile, in Russia, the earthquakes keep shaking the ground. Suzuha, growing suspicious of the changes in the world line, picks up on a familiar name her father mentions. In an instant, everything clicks, and she understands what's going on. Okabe, too, feels the weight of the changes in the timeline. He resolves to protect Mayuri and the current Beta world line with everything he has. He moves them to a safe hotel, but soon gets a message from Suzuha demanding to meet. When Okabe arrives, Suzuha wastes no time. She asks if there has been a shift in the world line and whether this one is the right one. Okabe hesitates, unsure of how to answer, but before he can say anything, Suzuha points a gun at him. Her gaze is cold, and her voice demands the truth. Caught off guard, Okabe finally opens up, telling her everything about the Alpha world line and the temporary shift he's experienced. Suzuha listens carefully and then reveals the real cause of the earthquakes. They aren't the result of nuclear activity, as Okabe feared. Instead, they're a sign of the fierce competition between America and Russia to create a time machine, a race that could ultimately lead them into World War III. Okabe feels a cold wave of fear as the realization hits him. The key to controlling the time machine lies with Kurisu. His mind races with the implications, knowing that if America gets to her first, everything could spiral out of control. Suzuha, furious at Okabe's involvement, is determined to take him out. But before she can act, her father intervenes, stopping her in her tracks. Suzuha, overwhelmed with emotion, breaks down in tears, pleading for her father's help. The tension fills the air, but in that moment, her father offers her a comforting embrace, urging her to find another way. Meanwhile, Okabe digs deeper into his investigation, uncovering the truth behind Russia's ambitions to create a time machine. As the pieces of the puzzle start to fit together, Okabe's fear intensifies. He realizes that if America connects the dots first, Kurisu will be in their hands, and with her, the power to control time. On a ship, Suzuha and her father prepare for the next mission. As they work, Suzuha confides in her father about the ship's failing battery, admitting how difficult it will be to replace. Her father encourages her to write an apology letter to Okabe, and though reluctant, Suzuha agrees. They spend the rest of the evening together, sharing a rare moment of peace. The next day, Okabe visits Maho's room, only to find it in complete chaos. Papers are scattered everywhere, and books are piled up in disarray. He asks her what happened, and Maho explains that she's been buried in her research, trying to find answers. But as she speaks, Okabe's disappointment grows. There's no solid data to explain the sudden attacks. Feeling defeated, he leaves her room. However, as soon as Okabe is gone, Maho opens her laptop, revealing the name Kei Makise on the screen. The truth is clear. Maho has been hiding something from him. Maho opens her laptop, logging in as Salieri, and memories of her time with Kurisu flood her mind. She recalls their conversation about Mozart and the painful day Kurisu passed away. With a sigh, she carefully stores Kurisu's notebook in a locker and heads back to her lab. The professor is waiting for her and asks her to start up the AI system. Maho activates it, and suddenly, Kurisu's figure appears on the screen. The two women begin to argue, and the professor watches, amused by their bickering. In a playful twist, Kurisu teases Maho, realizing that she might have feelings for Okabe. Later, Okabe visits the hotel room where Maho and Kiryu are staying and is shocked to find the place completely trashed. Mayuri stands there, puzzled, wondering how it got so messy. Just then, Nasan enters and immediately takes charge, ordering everyone to clean up. Maho and Okabe step outside, discussing who could be responsible for the chaos in her room. Maho is taken aback when she learns that Kurisu had been researching a time machine. After returning to the room, they find everything neatly tidied up, but Maho feels uneasy, disliking how perfect the room now looks. Mayuri and Daru return, with a sleepy Naisan on their backs. Rumiho and Kiryu follow shortly after, bags in hand. Okabe, curious, asks what they're for, but Rumiho dismisses him, claiming it's just for their sleepover. That night, Maho, Kiryu, and Rumiho enjoy their sleepover, laughing and chatting as they drift off to sleep. The next day, Okabe takes Maho to a digital parts shop, and she excitedly examines every gadget, her eyes lighting up at each new discovery. After some wandering, they end up at the place where Kurisu had died. Maho, quiet and somber, tells Okabe she wants to visit the room one last time. Reluctantly, Okabe leads her there, but as they stand outside, memories of his time with Kurisu overwhelm him, and he bolts, running away from the painful memories. Still trying to calm his racing heart, Maho quietly asks him how he knew Kurisu so well, despite not having spent much time together. Okabe hesitates, memories of the Alpha World line clouding his thoughts. He doesn't know if he can reveal the truth, but Maho, summoning all her courage, confesses something important. She tells Okabe that she still has Kurisu's laptop, the one with all of her research data. Okabe, startled by the revelation, grabs Maho's arms, shaking her urgently. He demands to know everything. The data in that laptop is the key to a possible world war, the one thing that both America and Russia desperately want, and if it falls into the wrong hands, it could ignite World War III. Maho's face pales with fear, realizing the gravity of the situation. The weight of Okabe's words sinks in, and she finally understands just how dangerous the data really is. Maho takes Okabe with her to the location where she was keeping Kurisu's laptop, and they enter a store. Maho leads them to a clothes section and gets the message on her phone to enter the passage near the maid's costume. They enter the passage and find a door. They enter the room and find Daru. Okabe is shocked by his friend there and asks what he was doing there. Daru explains that Maho gave him the task to hack into Kurisu's laptop. Okabe watches Daru, who is continuously deciphering Kurisu's laptop data, and asks Daru to stop the process immediately. Maho disagrees with him and tells him that she wants to continue the legacy of Kurisu. Okabe warns her to not dwell further on the data, as that could lead to a drastic war. Okabe mentions the time machine and quickly stops himself before he reveals the truth to Maho. He asks her to leave the room and asks Daru to stop the process. Daru advises him to tell Maho the truth, and Okabe feels reluctant to do it. In the end, Okabe agrees and tells Maho the truth about Kurisu's data and warns her not to further get involved with the time machine and its processes. Okabe knew that after Maho got to know about the time machine, she would try her best to save Kurisu, but Okabe didn't want that to happen. He tells Maho that no matter what she does, she will not be able to save Kurisu, and if she tries to do so, she will destroy a complete world line. Maho feels terrible knowing that she can't save her old friend even with all of her efforts combined, but agrees with Okabe. Okabe enters the room and decides to destroy Kurisu's laptop and asks Maho to give the permission to do so, but she refuses to let go of Kurisu's legacy. Okabe makes his reasoning and convinces Maho to agree with him. Finally, when Maho understands that the laptop is the key to worldly destruction, she agrees to let the laptop be destroyed for good. Before they can destroy the laptop, they get ambushed by the enemy, and they flee the hideout. Unluckily, they get surrounded by the enemy, and Maho is taken as a hostage. Okabe makes a deal with the attackers and lets them take the laptop for the sake of their own lives. The attackers let them go, but before they could escape, they were attacked by another group of attackers who arrived there in a van and fired bullets at them. The laptop gets destroyed, but luckily Maho, Daru, and Okabe are safe in the attack. They come back to their room all relieved that they were able to avoid a war from happening. Maho, who is still in shock, feels lost after losing the legacy of Kurisu. She faints after taking a bath since her body, which was in continuous stress, got relaxed in the bath. She rests in the end with Okabe sitting beside her and consoling her. She explains that she felt obsessed with Kurisu's laptop and was just curious about what was inside the laptop, and now that it was gone, she feels relieved. The next day, Maho and her professor leave for America, and finally, Okabe bids his goodbye to Kurisu. The professor invites him to come to his university so they can research on something together, and Mayuri readily agrees to go if Okabe goes. Okabe makes the assumption that the Americans were behind the attack on them, and the Russians were the ones who used guns to destroy the laptop. Okabe feels relieved that finally the terrible days were over, and now everyone went back to their normal routine. He feels relieved knowing their actions were able to bring peace to the world. In one of Kagari's childhood memories, she wakes up in a bed to see a figure she believes is her mommy watching over her. Her mom smiles and tells her that her treatment is complete and she's now officially Kagari's mom. Her mom then takes her out for a walk, humming a song as they go. Curious, Kagari asks about the song, and her mom explains that it was taught to her by someone very special, and she wants Kagari to learn it too. The song is something she hopes Kagari will sing when she finds someone dear to her. Together, they sing the song and continue walking, the memory filled with warmth. Back in the present, Kagari is hanging out with Daru and Mayuri when Mayuri offers her some food she's made. As Mayuri hums the same song Kagari's mom used to sing, Kagari freezes. She walks up to Mayuri, confused, saying that she recognizes the song but can't remember where from. The flood of forgotten memories overwhelms her, and she faints right into Mayuri's arms. Okabe rushes over to the house, asking Mayuri about Kagari's condition. She fills him in on what happened, and soon he meets up with Suzuha, who shares a troubling story. Suzuha recalls an incident when Kagari, only 10 years old, had pointed a gun at her, threatening that if Suzuha changed the world, she might never be able to see her mommy again. Suzuha explains that Kagari's life changed drastically when she met Mayuri, which is why Mayuri has become like a mother to her. Kagari wakes up on the couch, still disoriented, but she remembers something important: the song. She believes it could be the key to unlocking her lost memories. They head to their usual cafe, where Mayuri reveals that Suzuha often hums the song while gazing out of the window. Kagari insists that she needs to discover the source of the song, believing it might unlock her forgotten memories. Okabe wonders if the song might be some kind of future hit, but decides to take action and call Suzuha to ask her about it. Suzuha, having just won an eating competition, tells him she learned it from someone named Yuki-san. Determined to find answers, they track down Yuki-san, who's on a date with Daru. After a quick chat, they ask her about the song. Yuki-san explains that she learned it from someone who used to take classes with her. In a last-ditch effort, Okabe calls this person, and to his surprise, it turns out to be his own mother. Hearing his mother's voice on the phone, Okabe is stunned. When he asks her about the song, his mother drops a bombshell. Okabe himself used to sing it to Mayuri. The circle of confusion deepens. His mother explains that he sang it all the time when they were younger, leaving Okabe baffled and more curious than ever. With the mystery only growing, Okabe, Mayuri, and Kagari decide to visit Mayuri's grandmother's grave. As Mayuri talks to her grandma about Kagari, the sky suddenly darkens and rain begins to pour. They rush to find shelter, but in the midst of it, Mayuri notices Kagari shivering. Before she can react, Kagari faints again. This time, in her unconscious state, Kagari finds herself chasing after her mommy figure. When she catches up, she's shocked to see Mayuri as her mom. Kagari wakes up in the hospital and, overwhelmed with emotion, rushes to hug Mayuri, shouting that she's missed her so much. Mayuri hesitates at first, unsure how to react, but then pulls Kagari into a comforting embrace, finally accepting the role of her mother figure. Everyone watches helplessly as Kagari clings to Mayuri and calls her mommy over and over. Daru praises Mayuri for perfectly handling the situation, while Okabe tells him that Mayuri simply accepted Kagari's pleas for her to be Kagari's mother. Suzuha, who couldn't bear watching it anymore, leaves the place and goes back to her work. Mayuri gifts Kagari a matching phone case that she joyfully shows off to everyone. For some reason, Daru and Okabe find Kagari's distorted memories weird and want to investigate them. Kagari then goes to her job and finds an annoyed Suzuha there. She asks her why she has started hating her, but Suzuha simply scolds her, and they get into an argument, leading them both to get in a sour mood. Mayuri decides to throw a party for Kagari's memories to be restored and tells Okabe about it. She invites all their friends and tells Kagari to get back home on time. Kagari quickly guesses that Mayuri is throwing a party for her, but goes with the flow to make Mayuri happy. Okabe is constantly investigating what could have led to Kagari getting only her childhood memories back, and gets the suspicion that someone is deliberately trying to suppress her memories for some reason. He asks Kiryu about the matter, and she shows him the location where Kagari was first found and suspects that there might be something there that can lead them to finding out about Kagari's memories. Suzuha talks to her father about the problem with Kagari. She tells him that it would have been so nice if she was able to enjoy her time like Kagari. She lets her frustration out in front of her father and expresses that she wants to spend her time relaxed here and wants to be spoiled by everyone else. Her father then consoles her and tells her that he can spoil her as much as she wants, and Suzuha feels relieved hearing her father's words and reflects on her actions. Everyone waits at the party, and even Suzuha, who realizes her mistake, shows up for the party with Mayuri's invitation. They all then wait for Okabe and Kagari to show up at the party. Okabe and Kiryu find the location that has clues about Kagari's memories. Kiryu explains to Okabe that this place has been in use recently, not less than a year ago. He looks at the traces of the building and also senses something dark in there. Kiryu suggests they look deeper into the building to figure out what was the real secret behind the distortion in Kagari's memories. They dwell further and find a disturbing room filled with Kagari's drawings, which look like a crazy obsessed person had drawn all over the room. The room was filled with the same word, mommy, written and drawn all over. Okabe quickly gets that something was gravely wrong there, and this place was not just a treatment center. On the other hand, Kagari, who was walking back home happily to meet Mayuri, suddenly gets the memories of her past and feels like someone is calling for her. She looks at the sky, and the cake in her hand falls down. She then starts walking towards a different direction, saying that the voice of God is calling for her. Mayuri calls Okabe and tells her that Kagari has gone missing, and he quickly runs out of the building to find her. Months fly by, and still no sign of Kagari. Daru and Suzuha are getting desperate, so they try to get Maho's help to build the time leap machine. Meanwhile, Fubuki gets dragged back to the hospital, and Rintarou runs into Leskinen. Of course, they cross paths again. Back at the lab, Suzuha finds Kagari's UPA toy just lying on the floor. Just then, she gets attacked by Kagari, who's been brainwashed into some freaked-out version of herself. She wasn't just brainwashed, though. Suzuha realizes Kagari was messed up before even making that jump to the past. Suzuha and Daru are frustrated, so they contact Maho again. She's reluctant at first, but then Amadeus Kurisu's spirit gives her a nudge, reminding her to go back to Japan. With her motivation rebooted, she finally agrees to help them out with the time machine. Maho lands back in Japan, and it's straight into the chaos. Suzuha, totally freaked out that her future birth might not happen, drags everyone into this mission to boost Daru's confidence so he can confess to Yuki. In the meantime, Maho, tech-savvy, uses a gadget that turns Daru into a ladies' man, just in time for his big date with Yuki. However, everything falls apart the moment Daru gets manly. Yuki runs away, leaving Daru feeling dejected. That's when Suzuha drops the bombshell. There is no someone else waiting for Yuki in the future. She just wanted to remind herself of the peace she had before Yuki got taken out. It's a mess, but it's real. And that honesty hits Daru like a ton of bricks. With Suzuha's tough love, Daru decides to ditch the act and just be his goofy, awkward self the next time he sees Yuki. He then confesses his feelings for her, and they become a couple. Watching them from the sidelines, Suzuha feels this little spark of self-confidence. And there, in the background, Kagari's observing it all, silently taking notes. Meanwhile, Rintarou is still working hard to qualify for overseas studies, but it's got Mayuri worried about him. Meanwhile, Daru and Maho are grinding away on the time leap machine, but it's going nowhere fast. Just as they're about to give up, Rintarou angrily barges in. He's yelling about how saving both Mayuri and Kurisu is a pipe dream, and how he had to pick Mayuri, locking them into the beta world line. Dude's barely holding it together. But Maho, hopeful, says Steins Gate is out there somewhere. They just need to figure out the formula to get there. It's a full-on standoff. Rintarou storms out, done with the debate, and bumps into Mayuri outside. Turns out, Mayuri heard the whole thing. And she's not mad, she's sad. She spills her guts, telling Rintarou she regrets stopping him from trying to save Kurisu. She knows he's still drowning in guilt, pretending to be fine, but deep down, he's miserable. Her words hit him like a truck, leaving him to wrestle with the weight of his choices all over again. Mayuri, tired of being kept in the dark, corners Suzuha and begs her to give her the information on the future and everything Rintarou's been through. Suzuha, knowing that the time is drawing near, lays it all out: the grim future, her mission, and the fact she's planning to bounce back to the past that very day. Hearing this, Mayuri makes a bold move. She decides she will join her. She's determined to see the old Kyomahuin again, even if it means putting her feelings for Rintarou aside. Her plan is to convince past Rintarou to save Kurisu. Meanwhile, Rintarou gets blindsided by Maho, who tells him someone hacked the Amadeus system and is digging into Kurisu's notes on time machines. Panicking, he runs to stop Suzuha and Mayuri, but they're already gearing up to leave. As Suzuha preps the time machine, her gadget beeps with a D-mail from Daru. 2025 Daru. The message is that their actions already flipped the world line, and it's time to kick off Operation Arclight. But before Suzuha can even process it, chaos erupts. Armed soldiers show up, guns blazing, ready to snatch the time machine. Suzuha fends of the soldiers to buy Mayuri time to escape. But then, the unthinkable happens. Mayuri gets caught in the crossfire and takes a bullet. Suzuha screams, caught between rage and despair, as their mission starts crumbling around them. Furious after seeing Mayuri hurt, Kagari snaps, tearing through the soldiers like a woman possessed. She takes heavy hits, but she's not going down without a fight. Meanwhile, Rintarou is blindsided by Leskinen, who drops the ultimate bombshell. He's part of Stratfor, and he's been playing puppet master this whole time. He admits he got future intel straight from Kagari's brainwashed self, which his older self used to orchestrate everything: her journey to the past, the creation of Amadeus, and the preservation of Kurisu's time travel theories. Leskinen isn't just bragging either. He's got Maho and Daru at gunpoint, ready to take the time machine for himself. Just as things look hopeless, Kagari, battered and bleeding, uses her last ounce of strength to take down the remaining soldiers and sucker punch Leskinen into next week. With that opening, Suzuha makes a mad dash to get Mayuri into the time machine. Before they can escape, a Derpa helicopter shows up, missiles blazing. The time machine takes a direct hit, exploding in a fiery wreck. Suzuha and Mayuri vanish in the chaos, their fate a big question mark. Rintarou collapses, broken and drowning in guilt. Amid the wreckage, his phone buzzes with a final message from Mayuri. In it, she pours her heart out, explaining why she was willing to risk everything to change the past and why she believes he has the strength to do what's right. With the time machine destroyed and World War III about to start, Rintarou works with Maho and Daru to finish the time leap machine. Thanks to a boost of confidence from Amadeus Kurisu, Maho completes the machine, and Rintarou jumps back in time to before everything went wrong. He quickly tells Maho and Daru to hack Leskinen's computer and grab the Amadeus data. Then, he rushes to warn Mayuri and Suzuha about the danger and learns about their plan to convince his past self to aim for Steins Gate again. Just as he tells them to leave, a soldier attacks Rintarou, and it turns out to be Prof. Reyes. Before she can do more damage, Leskinen shows up and shoots her, but things spiral out of control again. The time machine gets destroyed, leaving Rintarou no choice but to keep time leaping to save Mayuri and Suzuha. Rintarou wakes up and realizes he's somehow in 2036. Akihabara is a wreck, torn apart by World War III, and Daru, Suzuha, and the crew are leading a resistance. Daru explains what went down. They used the recovered time leap machine to send Rintarou's 2011 memories into his future body. Daru breaks the bad news. Back in 2011, the time leap machine glitched, and they missed the 48-hour window to save Mayuri. They had no choice but to start building a new time machine. By 2025, Rintarou was captured and tortured by Stratfor, leaving him brain dead but alive when Daru finally saved him. For 11 years, the resistance kept Rintarou's condition a secret, hoping for a miracle. Before Rintarou can process it all, Luca and Ferris get caught in an enemy trap. Luca heroically sacrifices himself to save the others, dying in Rintarou's arms. The weight of everything hits Rintarou hard. He can't avoid the truth any longer. Determined to fix the timeline and reach the Steins Gate world line, Rintarou asks to use the time leap machine one last time to go back to 2011 and make things right. With Amadeus Kurisu's guidance, Rintarou starts a brutal grind of back-to-back time leaps, clawing his way toward 2011. When he reaches 2025, the day he's supposed to get captured, Amadeus and the gang step up. They help him dodge the Stratfor goons and make it to Akihabara, where he finally completes his leap to the past. Back in 2011, Rintarou dusts off his mad scientist alter ego, Kyoma Huin, ready to turn the tables. He gets Daru working on recovering Amadeus' data and teams up with Tenuji to take down a brainwashed Kagari. With their help, Rintarou and Moika manage to intercept Leskinen's schemes, giving Mayuri and Suzuha the chance to board the time machine. But just as things start looking up, disaster strikes. The attack helicopters show up earlier than expected, firing a missile right as the time machine activates. After countless failed attempts to save Mayuri and Suzuha, Rintarou figures out the real problem. He needs to stop the Russians from messing with the time machine. Turns out, their secret weapon is Kurisu's memory data. That's when Amadeus Kurisu steps in with a bold plan. Use Daru's D-Rhine app to send a D-mail to the past, telling his younger self to delete her program. Rintarou's not ready to let her go, but Amadeus spends the night convincing him. She tells him it's worth it if it means finding Steins Gate and stopping World War III. Her words hit hard, but her determination pushes Rintarou to finally agree. In a bittersweet moment, Amadeus Kurisu says goodbye to everyone, her voice steady even as it breaks their hearts. With a deep breath, Rintarou sends the D-Rhine. In an instant, Amadeus is gone, and Rintarou shifts into a new world line, one step closer to saving everyone. Landing in a world line where Amadeus is wiped from existence, Rintarou wastes no time heading to the rooftop. With Moika's help, he slips past Leskinen and makes it just in time to push Mayuri and Suzuha toward their mission. Meanwhile, Kagari, finally trusting Rintaro, throws herself into the fight, holding back the enemy just long enough for the time machine to take off before the chopper unleashes hell. Once Mayuri and Suzuha arrive in the past, they hatch a bold plan. Mayuri calls her past self, dropping a heartfelt pep talk and asking her to steer Rintaro back on track. Then, to dodge a time paradox, Mayuri and Suzuha are forced to jump blindly into another era. Back in the past, Mayuri delivers a well-placed slap to Rintaro, jolting him out of his funk just as he receives a D-mail from his future self. In 2025, Rintaro records a video for his younger self, laying out the steps to save both Mayuri and Kurisu and finally reach Steins Gate. But Rintaro isn't done yet. Climbing into a time machine, he sets off to find Mayuri and Suzuha. He tracks them all the way back to 18,000 BC, a barren wasteland where they've been stranded. As Mayuri and Suzuha brace themselves for the worst, Rintaro swoops in, time machine roaring, ready to bring them home. The story kicks off in August 2011, a year after everything happened in the visual novel and anime. Rintarou Okabe has been through a tough journey, jumping across many world lines because he invented D-mail. He managed to trick the universe and the powerful attractor field convergence into thinking that Kurisu Makise was killed. This created a new world line called Steins Gate, where both Mayuri Shiina and Kurisu Makise survive. In this new reality, humanity enjoys a peaceful future, World War III is avoided, and the scary CERN-run dystopia never happens. On August 3rd, Kurisu arrives in Japan for a press conference and meets up with all the members of the Future Gadget Laboratory. But after she and Okabe hang out in the lab, Okabe starts feeling the intense side effects from his past time travels. He begins having longer and stronger visions of his old experiences from other world lines and even sees things from a world line he never actually visited. The next day, August 4th, a mysterious person shows up at Kurisu's hotel room. They tell her to remember 3 things: a cell phone, a microwave oven, and CERN. Later that day, while Kurisu is chatting with Okabe at a laundromat about how her own déjà vu moments might be like Okabe's reading Steiner, ability to remember other world lines, something strange happens. Okabe suddenly disappears right in front of her. Even weirder, no one else seems to remember Okabe ever existed. Kurisu herself only has a faint memory of the original founder of the Future Gadget Lab. Fast forward to August 11th, a week after Okabe's strange disappearance. While searching her things, Kurisu finds a fork that Okabe had once given her. The sight of it sparks a memory of the mysterious stranger's words: a cell phone, a microwave oven, and CERN. When she learns that Itaru Daru Hashida had somehow hacked into CERN, something clicks. Driven by an unexplained urgency, Kurisu decides to use this to build a time leap machine. With the machine complete, Kurisu leaps back to the night of August 3rd. There, she witnesses something unbelievable. Okabe flickering in and out of existence, as if the universe itself can't decide where he belongs. Everyone's memories of him shift each time, like he's being erased from reality. Before she can process what's happening, the stranger contacts her again, revealing herself as Suzuha Amane, a time traveler from the future, sent using a machine built by none other than future Kurisu. Suzuha lays it all out. Okabe's constant memories of other world lines are overwhelming his reading Steiner ability, making him time leap uncontrollably between the Steins Gate world line and the R world line, a nearly identical timeline where neither Mayuri nor Kurisu die. Suzuha warns that if nothing changes, Okabe will vanish forever. The only way to save him is for Kurisu to use a time machine to go to the past and alter his memory, anchoring him to the Steins Gate world line for good. But Okabe refuses. His voice is firm, filled with pain. He argues that time machines and time leap machines should never exist. They've caused enough suffering. He's ready to accept his fate if it means Kurisu and Mayuri can live peaceful lives. Kurisu, determined to save him, begs him to let her try, but Okabe cuts her off with a kiss. With tears in his eyes, he pleads, "Forget me, Kurisu. Live your life without regrets." The next day, Kurisu rushes to the lab, her heart pounding with urgency. She's made up her mind. She has to confess her love to Okabe. She can't pretend anymore. Forgetting him is impossible. It's just like that moment back at the end of episode 22, when she tried to tell him her feelings right before he shattered the 1% divergence barrier. But before she can say the words, the unthinkable happens again. Okabe vanishes right before her eyes. Kurisu stands frozen, her chest tight with grief, until the tears finally spill over. Overwhelmed, she almost gives in to despair, reaching for her time leap machine to bring him back again. Her hand hovers over the controls, trembling with conflict, but then she hears his voice in her mind. His warning, his plea, "Forget me, Kurisu." With her heart breaking, she forces herself to stop, even though the thought of letting him go feels unbearable. By August 13th, things get worse. The future gadget lab might have to shut down for good. Kurisu feels the weight of everything crashing down, but then Suzuha shows up again. This time, she doesn't hold back. She calls out Kurisu for not being honest about how she feels, pushing her to face the truth she's been burying. Suzuha's words hit home, and Kurisu finally gives in. With determination shining through her tears, she agrees to go with Suzuha in her time machine, ready to take one last chance to save Okabe and maybe herself. Suzuha reveals the key to saving Okabe. He needs a powerful memory to anchor him to the Steins Gate world line. Something so strong, it sets this timeline apart from all others. With determination, Kurisu and Suzuha travel back to June 30th, 2005. Kurisu tries to connect with a young Okabe, but things take a disastrous turn. Her actions inadvertently lead to him getting into a car accident, leaving her paralyzed with guilt and too scared to attempt another time trip. Back in the present, where Okabe no longer exists, Kurisu feels the weight of his absence everywhere. But then she makes a discovery. Mayuri and the others still have faint, flickering memories of Okabe. Their bond to him isn't entirely broken. When Kurisu mimics Okabe's over-the-top persona, Huin Kyuma, their shared laughter stirs something deep inside them, bringing fragments of him back to life in their minds. Fueled by their support, Kurisu finds the courage to try again. She returns to the past, this time with a clear goal. She successfully plants the idea of Hoenkyuma into young Okabe's mind, a coping mechanism he would later use to shield Mayuri emotionally. To seal the memory, she gives him his first kiss, an unforgettable moment that imprints itself deeply in his heart. Back in the present, the memory takes root. Okabe is pulled back from the R-World line to Steins Gate. As he and Kurisu share a final conversation, the transition becomes clear. A bustling crowd materializes around them, symbolizing his return.